I'm Jack,
And I'm Brenden,
and we're coming to you from beyond the terrarium.
where DIY meets naturalistic reptile keeping.
Enjoy. All right, everybody, welcome back to episode number 12 of Beyond the Terrarium. I am your co-host, Jack, along with my co-host, Brenden. Brenden, how are we doing tonight?
I'm peachy, man.
Peachy?
The basement's dry.
Basement is dry.
Internet works.
Internet is
So
working.
we're good to go.
Things are looking up. And we're
Things
at,
are
what,
looking up.
76 days on the cat gecko eggs?
Yeah. I think
Was
so.
I right on?
I think so, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah,
was
I
a
had to
guess from
count
last
earlier,
week.
and I was going to write it down, so I had it, but I completely forgot, so I'm glad you remembered.
Yep, 76. So, what, 85?
And I read 85, so we should be getting, within the next, 10-ish days, hopefully we get some babies.
That'll be awesome. It's soon. It's within the next 2 episodes. We're gonna have cat geckos live.
We definitely should. So we'll see.
Yeah.
No, and in that time, we may have some more laid also, which would be cool.
Yeah.
Because that girl
starting
is
up the cycle again.
Thick, dude. She looks so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
She's
ready to pop.
She's been laying almost on her side in the back corner of the cage, and you can just look at her. You can just tell she's so uncomfortable.
Yeah, she's ready to go.
Hopefully, in a few days, we'll have some more.
Yep. Yeah. That's awesome, man. I can't wait. It's going to be incredible. You're going to cry.
Oh, yeah, dude.
It's going to be.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to be stoked. It's going to be insane.
Good. Well, without any further ado, we've got an awesome guest tonight that we're super stoked to bring you guys. We've been really on the lizard train recently, and tonight I hope to get away from that a little bit and talk a little turtles, a little more up my alley. And so with that, we've got Nick Brewster joining us today. You might follow him on Instagram, Loki and Brewster. Welcome to the show, Nick. We are super stoked to have you on.
Thank you guys for having me. I'm happy to be on.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I think first we need to just kind of dive into who you are, what you do, because I think, you have an interesting connection to the hobby just because you're kind of involved in a professional educational manner, and then you're also involved in a hobbyist perspective. So I'd love for you to kind of, talk about what you currently do and how you got there.
Right. So I am the director of education at Arc Wildlife Rehabilitation and Education Center. So we are a nonprofit wildlife rehab here in Southeast Pennsylvania. We see between 5,000 to 7,000 animals every year.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
A lot of animals, man.
I was going to say, I'm actually there right now. This is my office. So it's a little bit of a clutter because I did previously have our common snapping turtle in here and pour down that tank. So the whole thing's a mess in here. Yep. But I was going to say they have I think they have 36 raccoons next door right now and
oh wow,
200 squirrels.
Oh my God.
Oh, dang.
Yeah. We're licensed for all Pennsylvania native wildlife with the exception of bear. So I always tell people if you find a bear, you're on your own. Everything else is fair game for us. So as the director of education, I do a lot of outreach programs. So whether that be, we have summer camps here. So over the summer, I have 6 or 7 groups of kids throughout the summer here. Obviously going out to places and giving presentations, tours, talking to people about what we do here. And my background in education, I have a bachelor's in conservation and wildlife management from Delaware Valley University. And I do work with a little bit of everything here, obviously, but my passion has always been reptiles and amphibians to that extent. And prior to professionally working here, I was obviously a hobbyist. I had animals at home. one of my animals I have at home right now, the oldest one, is my coastal carpet.
Nice.
Yeah, coastal.
Yeah.
She's been with me since high school, and I think currently she's around 16-ish, 17.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. So
Nick.
I've been doing this I've been messing around with reptiles for a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. So what do you like personally, like what do you work with at home? What's your collection looking like?
So I did get not completely out of reptiles. Obviously I've had my carpet python since high school basically, but I did get out of reptiles like as a main like focus as a hobby for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started to get back into it maybe 6-7 years ago now. And I do have some animals at home that are just kind of like I say almost my, like, just for me, like I wanted to work with that animal. But a lot of the things I have now are kind of rescues that have kind of come in. So
Gotcha.
Obviously we're a wildlife rehab, so we're trying to deal with native wildlife, but people bring in weird things all the time.
Yes. Yeah.
People find something outside and they don't know. It's not something that's not supposed to be there.
Yeah.
But at home, mostly it's, as far as lizards go, I do have leopard gecko, tegu, frilled neck lizard. For snakes, I got the carpet python and a couple hognoses, and primarily it's turtles.
Nice.
Lots of turtles. I was gonna say, we have a three-toed box turtle and a Gulf Coast box turtle thing. He's some type of
something.
I'll say those two both came in through the rehab.
Gotcha.
Same with my diamondback terrapins, sliders, southern painted turtle, mud turtle, musk turtle, like just general mix of things there. As far as tortoises go, we do have 2 Russian tortoises that came in through here that people are like, I found a box turtle.
That's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then let's say rounding it out, we also have a cherry head tortoise, which is
nice.
That's
awesome.
It's a species I like. So
yeah, absolutely. Those are some of the prettiest tortoises, and as long as you set them up right, they seem to do really well in captivity. And the cherry head's nice too because they're a lot smaller than something like a full redfoot.
Too, honestly.
Really? Okay.
That's the thing I love. It's like you walk in and it's like they're cued in right on you. Awesome. Whereas like the Russians, they kind of don't.
They're like, give me some lettuce and then go away. Yeah. That's awesome. No, and so you mentioned the tegu. You, for a while, weren't you doing stuff like studies with the tegu?
Yeah. So when I went back to school to finish my degree, I did a student research project, and I ended up using my tegu as the subject. And I worked with one of my professors who his specialty was like animal behavior.
Nice.
So the thing I wanted to look at is with tegus, you always hear people talking about how smart like tegus are as a lizard, but when it comes to like the actual research that was out there, any intelligence studies that had to do with lizards for the most part was basically focused on monitor lizards. So, I kind of wanted to see if I could do some type of like intelligence study to see like what is actually going on there with them, like, and kind of compare it to what we see in varanids. And what we ended up coming up with was basically because he is target trained. Before I even did this, I did target training with him because honestly, very early on when he was small, he ended up nailing me because he thought he was dead. And that was one of the most painful experiences as far as being hit by an animal.
Yeah.
everyone's like, oh, how bad were like the teeth? And I go, the problem with tegu teeth is you see all the sharp teeth in the front, but in the back they actually have like these huge molars.
Oh, okay.
So it's like all crushing force. And the way I describe it to people is it's like if you took your thumb and got it stuck in a car door, and then someone every now and then would press down on the door.
Oh.
Yeah. I was gonna say the whole finger was like black and blue. It was not.
Oh, geez.
Not a good time. I was like, all right, we got to do something so, you know, when he's full grown, he's not like ripping my hand off.
Yeah. Yes. Get that.
But what we ended up deciding was kind of a variation of the target training, where we were doing basically color differentiation like tests. And what we were looking at is to see if not only does he like distinguish between different colors, but we were also seeing if he could understand different shades of colors. And basically, oh God, what's the word? It's been a while since I've talked about this.
Sorry, I put you on the spot with this.
I know. It's basically what's the term I'm looking for? It'll come to me at some point. But it was basically seeing if he could understand the concept of lighter and darker as far as colors go. It's like a very like abstract thought. That's basically what it is. Seeing if they were capable of abstract thought.
Okay.
So what we started with is he was originally trained to a black target. So we would offer him 2 different targets at the same time. And this first set of colors we worked with was black going through a couple shades of gray to white. Okay. And when we present the 2 colors at the same time, obviously one would be darker than the other, and whichever of the 2 there was, the goal was to get him would be rewarded whichever the darker color he went to.
Gotcha.
So we started with a black target and a white target and made sure he understood what was going on. Mm-hmm. And he was already trained to the black target, so he knew exactly what he was doing. From there, we introduced the 2 gray colors. So there was a darker gray, a lighter gray, and then like a middle gray. And we would present those 2 at the same time, or 2 of them at the same time. We'd switch sides, obviously, so it wasn't always the same. It wasn't like a side biased.
Yeah.
And he actually did very well at that, kind of figuring out like, okay, I'm going to the darker, whichever 2 there is. From there, we reintroduced the black and the white. So now there was, 5 separate colors he was choosing from, with whichever 2 at random were put out. And once we were like, okay, he very much understands what's happening, we completely changed the colors. So going from this black to white spectrum, we switched it to blue. So dark blue, a lighter blue, all the way down to like this really light baby blue.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea was if he understood what he was being rewarded for was distinguishing between dark and light, if I switch the colors, he should automatically understand like, okay, even though it's different colors now, I need to go to the darker one. And it was funny because we had this, the way we kind of scored him is he would do 10 rounds like per session. And if he did like so well in like so many sessions, he would move on to the next step of the progress. Well, when we introduced the blue, he did 100%, and then my professor's like, that's kind of weird. Let's try to do a couple more rounds. And basically, because he's like, that's kind of like, make sure it's not a fluke because of how well he did. And basically, we did it again, and he was like right on it. He knew exactly what he was doing.
Wow.
Ideally, we were supposed to progress further on and do more colors. I did play around a little bit with like some red, and he did really well with the red, but we kind of ran out of time for the thing. And the other thing is there was another Tegu at a facility I worked with that we were supposed to have them be part of the program, but that ended up not working out. Just stuff going on with that facility, but it was really cool to see because it kind of suggested that tegus were capable of like abstract thought and were able to distinguish between things. And it was kind of interesting because we also obviously we're looking at other like actual published papers that were done, and there wasn't anything on tegus specifically that I could find. It was mostly like varanids, like I said. But I did actually find some papers that were looking at whiptails, which whiptails are teiids, so they're like they're more closely related to tegus. And it was interesting because the results we were getting were more similar to what we were seeing when they were testing monitor lizards. The whiptail seemed kind of like they were just doing whatever. Yeah. So it was kind of interesting. And then when we did the paper, we were just talking about like, it's kind of interesting because tegus are basically convergent evolution with monitor lizards for the New World, because we don't have them here. So it's kind of interesting that it seemed at least that their intelligence was also kind of convergently involved. Yeah. Obviously, it was like a sample size of 1, and ideally, you do like more research with it with more tegus, and maybe bring in some other teiids to kind of compare it. But yeah,
that's really cool.
Yeah, that's super interesting, man.
Yeah, it's funny. I've seen some whiptails in the wild. I've seen like the Aruba Island whiptails, and I just can't imagine them doing anything that smart. So I can see them being very all over the place, you know?
Yeah.
Like they don't act like a tegu really at all. They're very chaotic, which I guess is what they're designed to do, you know, but they're much less analytical and much more just act first, thinking first, you know?
Right. So, I mean, I've talked to people about it when they describe like what's it like working with them, and there's like, because obviously now this is more like anthropomorphizing on my end, but you can tell there's a lot more going on. They pick like, I've had problems with him like breaking out of his enclosure, and he always like picks the same spots, and like specifically like he finds a spot that he's like, okay, this is weak, and he just targets it until he would get through. We finally got past that point where I was able to get something constructed where he doesn't break out. But
they're funny, man. It's funny. I would love to try something like that with my my dwarf caiman. But the problem with him isn't so much of like whether or not I think he can figure it out. I think he could do that. It's whether or not he wants to, because he's very like, not even like he's food motivated, but if he has to work for his food, he's not into it at all. So he's
even with like training, I talk about that with people, or with people about the animal, obviously, that it just gets way harder when it's an animal that's not food motivated. So like in our education center here, we actually have a pigeon who I work with, and he's definitely has enough going on that I could get him to do like simple stuff and like train him to do things, which I've wanted to do, but he has absolutely no interest in food.
He's like, there's no way you could get me to do that.
The only thing I can reliably get him to do is like the target to this one, like I have like basically a little stand, and I can get him to target to it, but it's mostly because he wants to land there and bite you. So the reward is biting you.
That's so funny.
I'd love to try to do some sort of target training with the Polychris. I think they could do it. Because they're definitely not varanid level smart, but they're another species. I think the more you work with them, you kind of realize that there's a little bit more going on than your typical lizard. You know what I'm saying?
Honestly, I've even seen target training with dart frogs before.
Really?
I think Disney's Animal Kingdom did it with their dart frogs.
Wow, so that's wild.
So they could actually get weights on them. I remember seeing that like on a documentary.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
How do you even like?
I don't.
Like, I'm just thinking about.
They had like these little micro scales, and it's like each frog was trained to one thing, and they'd open it up, and the frog would go in there, so they could actually get a weight on the frog.
That is crazy.
So then they would feed them within that area, or
something like that.
That's crazy, man.
I do like the research I did too. Like there was a bunch of different studies that were kind of there with like different varanids, and I was looking for something that was like not necessarily more doable, but it was like very easy to like kind of understand what was happening. And one of the studies I actually used was one that they did at Disney's Animal Kingdom, and they did a very similar target training test with like being able to see if they could understand abstract thought, and they actually did it with box turtles.
Interesting.
And the box turtles apparently did very well at it, and they even did well where they stopped doing it for a while and then picked it back up, and the turtles like immediately started doing it again.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. You got to think about box turtles having really good memories too, just because of like how they're evolved for specific areas and remembering where they're going to nest and everything like that. So that's interesting. Yeah. I feel like there hasn't been enough like intelligence studies on turtles because I
remember when I was doing this, there are some that exist.
Yeah.
Like I do know there was one that kind of showed that like it seemed like turtles could learn by watching another turtle.
Wow.
So they were like, I forget the exact like how it worked, but they were training a turtle to like do something for a food reward, and then seeing if the other turtles in the tank could like pick it up without directly being taught. And it seemed that they were able to do so.
Interesting. That's something interesting to think about too, from like a captivity perspective of like, if you've got a turtle, like we were talking about this the other day, like you've got a turtle that won't eat lettuce or won't eat greens or something like that, and putting it in a tank with other turtles that do.
Yeah, because I was gonna say I have one of our turtle setups here at ARC. I have like our little turtle pond. It's like an indoor stock tank, but we have our northern red-bellied cooter in there, and he was an absolute pain to get onto greens. Somebody was like illegally keeping him for 12 years, and all he had were pellets. So I'd give him lettuce, and he'd kind of just like, "What's this?" It took me months to get him on. We ended up getting a red-eared slider that came from another situation where someone had them for like 20 years. They just ate pellets and stuff, and I couldn't get her to eat lettuce, but when I introduced her to the thing, she started picking up on it really quickly. And I feel like it's almost like that other turtle was there eating the lettuce, and it's kind of like, oh, what are you doing? And then they take a bite, and they're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, it's not too bad. That's funny. Yeah, the social perspective of turtles, too. I was watching a podcast recently where they were talking about finally getting some level of understanding about communication between turtles, like in the Podocnemus specifically. And it's just like a whole untapped world of like studies that can be done there, because it's like, I feel like a pretty recent thing where they've understood that there's actually, communication going on there, which I think once you have communication involved, the level of intelligence, spikes.
Well, I remember because like I just have a lot of these papers not memorized, but I remember the gist of the papers from when I had to do this. I remember one of them is one of the things everyone talks about is reptiles don't have very large like brain size, so like a lot of people kind of dismiss them. What this paper did is because usually it's like reptiles are being compared to like a mammal of similar size, and they're looking at like the brain size ratio to the body ratio. But what this paper did is they looked at them compared to birds, because birds taxonomically are closer to like, lizards and snakes and such. And what they did is they looked at that, and the thing with birds is birds compared to a mammal of similar size also have a smaller brain, but their brains are more densely packed with neurons. So it's like it's more going on for the size compared to like a mammal brain.
Interesting.
And what they did in this study is when they looked at them side by side with birds of similar size, they accounted for the fact that a lot of reptiles, they have these big heavy tails. They don't have hollow bones like birds do, and a lot of them also have like, you got turtles that have shells, and crocodilians, and some snakes that have like big heavy osteoderms. So they kind of accounted for that, and then compared them to something that's like similar size, like with that accounted for. And I guess the reptile brain size wasn't too far off from birds.
Interesting.
Yeah, so they've kind of been dismissed, but there's probably a lot more going on there than people realize.
Yeah. They always talk about the alligator brain size being like a bean or whatever it is, but like alligators are some of the smartest reptiles there are, like it's the case study for training a reptile is alligators, I feel like. out of necessity and just ease of doing it. So
honestly, it's impressive, like the things you can train a crocodilian to do.
Yeah. I was working on the hold command the other day with Kevin because he's really taken a liking to trying to come out of the enclosure, which would not be a fun, experience for either of us. So I've been trying on the hold command, and it seems like it's taking pretty well. He's a very quick learner. Like I think I taught him how to be target trained in like 2 weeks, and I only feed him, twice a week. So he got that pretty quick. So it's very impressive.
Yeah, sometimes it surprises you how quick they pick up the target training.
Yeah.
Because I did it with my Tegu when I was younger, so obviously he was eating more than he eats now.
Mm-hmm.
So I could do it a little bit more regularly, but like within a week he had the idea down.
Yeah. It's wild how quickly they pick up on it. I feel like sometimes it's quicker than a dog almost, especially with the amount of times you're actually doing it, because you're not with a dog. You can just, feed treats consistently and then do it. But
it's like I see the people who target train snakes, and I'm like, how?
Yeah. Shout out to Lori Torini because she's doing.
Yeah, I was just about to say, yeah.
But yeah, no, that's awesome. All right, so I think we want to go quickly into how you got into wildlife rehabilitation and like kind of your day-to-day workload, and then we can talk more turtles after that. But
all right.
Yeah, like what does your normal day kind of consist of, and like what are you doing out there?
My normal day kind of consists. It's kind of weird because I don't necessarily have a normal day.
I kind of figured that might be the answer.
Yeah. The one nice thing about this job is I have like some flexibility when I come in and I do stuff and like what I do. So obviously there's a lot of, because I'm the director of education, there's a lot of like answering emails about people reaching out for programs, planning different programs that we have here. So like different workshops we do, planning the schedule and what we'll be doing during summer camps. Other things is obviously we have all our animal ambassadors. So I do work with all of them. I make sure their food, like they're being fed, they're being cleaned. One of the things I definitely, I think it's definitely something that like to talk about on here a little bit. Mm-hmm. It's a lot of the, more so like kind of the smaller enclosures that are here is they're all like naturalistic, bioactively set up.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, if they were just like your kind of traditional, like more minimalistic setups, I probably would not be able to actually have all these, like the animals that we have here.
Yeah.
I'm currently the only person working in our education department. So like I do get interns periodically throughout the year, but for the most part, it's just me. Mm-hmm. And it's something I think about, like I just sit there and I'm like, how much more work would go into my workload? Like, every week going in there, having to like some heavy spot cleaning or complete change of the substrates and everything.
Yeah.
Where it's like, I kind of go in there, I make sure things like the moisture levels are right in the soil, spot clean when I need to, some plant trimmings, and that's kind of about it as far as enclosure maintenance.
Yeah, that's one of the best things about bioactive. It's like I always, I'm like careful when I talk about it too, because like I don't want to be like, oh yeah, like bioactive, you don't have to do anything.
Right.
Yeah. You set it up this way. Like there's definitely maintenance, and you got to make sure like all the environmental factors are in check, which is most important. But like, yeah, the substrate changing, on a regular basis being gone is definitely an added benefit, because that sucks doing that. So, yeah, and then water bowls you'll never get away from. That's
and especially when it's like you have a setup that like has like lighting for the plants.
Mm-hmm.
It absolutely loves to grow algae in all your bowls. So you're like constantly cleaning these bowls, and it's like, didn't I just clean that yesterday? It's already a green film.
Yep.
But yeah, that's definitely one thing. I have been kind of doing a lot of pushing toward like other educators and other like nature centers and museums and stuff,
kind
of getting them like to kind of look into this, because I feel like it just, not only does it help your workload, like with that kind of maintenance, obviously you still have to, like you mentioned, there's still some work you have to do to it, but it definitely cut down on it. But it also just makes, obviously when you have people coming and visiting, it makes the experience a lot more pleasurable for them. Like ever since I've started like actually like working here, so just to run through that quickly, I kind of, while I was still in school, I started out here as a volunteer and an intern, and basically they never let me leave. And sometime after I graduated, the former person who was working in the education department stepped down, and they had an opening, and they knew I had done some work with like environmental education before, and they asked if I would be interested in the position. So
nice.
How I ended up getting into it is I just was here and never left.
It's the best way to get into something.
Yeah. But one of the things I do now, especially since like starting in here, is when I go to like any parks or anything, and there's like a nature center there or some type of museum where they have like something, I always go in and I look at all their setups. Mm-hmm. And, you know, a lot of times you go in and it's like, there was a park I went to, not too far back, but I went in their nature center and they had a box turtle set up, and it was literally just like a box, some bark and a water bowl, and it's like, not to like hate on any of these centers and stuff, because they're trying to keep things like kind of, I think sometimes the mindset is like, if I keep it like simple, it's easy for all of us to take care of.
Yeah.
But you know, I definitely think it does take away from like when people go and visit you. So that's one thing I have here, is I wanted to, with all the indoor animal enclosures I have, is I wanted to people come in and be like, wow, even if they don't see the animal that's in the enclosure.
Mm-hmm. Are you, with those enclosures, are you like, when you're setting them up and your thought process in setting them up, is it to be like as close to the natural environment as possible, or is it like, you know, the best display? Like, kind of what's your main goal of setting up the enclosure?
I definitely do kind of a mix of both. Like, obviously when I do something where it's like, I want this to kind of look somewhat like the animal's natural habitat, I want it to be like somewhat of a nice display too. But there's a couple that it's like, it's obviously, it meets all the animal's needs, but I'm like, okay, let's go a little bit like nicer looking. So like for example, like our corn snake display, our California king snake, and our salamander display is a little bit more like me trying to make it look somewhat like their natural environment. And then we have our Spanish rib newts. That's like, they come from like the Iberian Peninsula, so it's like kind of a drier habitat. Obviously they're still living in water and stuff. If you look at the ones here, their environment looks a little bit like a jungle. So that's a little bit less like natural or true to like their natural environment. But obviously they're, you know, they're an aquatic animal. They don't necessarily care what's going on above the water line.
Yeah. And that's an awesome exhibit too, the way you've got that set up, which we definitely want to dive into.
Yeah.
But I did want to say really quick, your corn snake enclosure is, I don't know if you guys have heard the joke. It's like, it was a while ago, but it was like this thing about like, how often do you think about the Roman Empire? And it was like asking your boyfriend, like, you know, but your corn snake exhibit is my Roman Empire. Like, I think about it all the time. Like the way you use the umbrella plant, like the Schefflera, instead of like rhododendron, or kind of like to mimic rhododendron, was, I when I saw that, I was like, that's the first time I've ever thought about using kind of like exotic plants that look similar to a native plant, because they're just easier to get a lot of times. And, you know, in this case, the Schefflera is a lot easier to house inside of an enclosure than something like rhododendron.
So like, I'm actually, one of my things, because, you know, I work in the environmental field, so it just kind of comes naturally with that, is I'm really big into when you're doing planting outdoors, doing native plants. When you're dealing with stuff indoors, that obviously changes, because the problem is, like, you know, here in Pennsylvania, it's a temperate climate. A lot of our native plants, they actually need to like go dormant over the winter.
Yeah.
So, you could set them up inside and they do really well for a while, but what ends up happening is they kind of lose steam and they fizzle out and the plant ends up dying on you.
Gotcha.
So what I look for instead is like, hey, can I find something that looks kind of similar or gives the same kind of vibe as this animal's natural habitat? So like, that's what I was kind of thinking with the corn snake habitat is, that the umbrella plant, like, honestly, it does look like a rhododendron.
Yeah, it's like, it's so similar. Yeah.
If you go down to like the pine barrens, there are, rhododendrons growing in there. It's like, it's a native plant to the Northeast.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been great if I could grow a pine tree in there, but it's not.
Yeah. Size issue there. Yeah, no, I definitely, I've got this enclosure that I've got a coastal carpet python in currently, but it's going to be a black rat snake enclosure eventually. And kind of based off the Appalachian Mountains, and definitely going to do the same thing there with the Schefflera as the rhododendron mimic. So
honestly, it does really, really well in there.
That's awesome.
Recently I just hacked it back and I literally like hack like a full foot off it like every like 2 or 3 months, and it comes back no problem.
That's awesome.
And it does well too with like the corn snakes, like literally like they abuse the snot out of that thing.
Yeah. So that's also something I wanted to ask, like how because you got 2 corn snakes in that enclosure, right? So do you have any issues, especially like, obviously there's the whole cohab thing, but then do you have any issues with like, increasing your amount of snake for like living plants and stuff like that, like the wear and tear basically?
Honestly, that I did not because where should I go with this?
Yeah, sorry.
So when we got recently another corn snake back in May, and did turn out to be a female. Our current corn snake's a female, and after talking to a couple of people who do like cohabitate rat snakes, I was kind of like debating on it, like, oh, do I go down this route? And I decided to give it a try, and they both actually get along really well. It's interesting, they do this behavior that someone I talked to about it, they coined the Pantherophis twitch, which is like they go near each other, one just starts kind of twitching, and I always thought it was like when you saw that, like, oh, it's a breeding behavior.
Yeah.
They're both female, and I guess basically the kind of what it is, it's basically like, hey, I'm here, I'm not food. So they're actually like communicating with each other when they're like moving around the enclosure, which is like,
interesting.
They don't do it all the time. They did a lot when they first were introduced, and I hadn't seen it again until literally last week. I fed them, and one of them actually went near the other one while it was like finishing up eating, and when the other one like went up to it and touched it, it immediately started twitching, which as soon as it started twitching, the other snake was like, oh, okay, and like left basically.
Yeah.
So a lot of people don't think of snakes being social, but it's interesting to see there is some communication going on there.
Yeah.
But to answer your question about the plant seems to be doing just as well. It's just, I think part of it is like making sure the plant actually gets established.
Yeah.
And the other thing too is that particular enclosure, there's literally like a foot of substrate. So if you go digging in there, the roots are all over the place. So it's like fully anchored down. Like, I don't know if I trust like, an adult carpet python climbing across it, but any of your like medium-sized colubrids, I think you can get away with some hefty plants. And I do have plans, not in the immediate future, but I do want to upgrade that enclosure, because obviously the enclosure is built with like one snake in mind, and now there's 2 of them in there. So I want to go bigger with that. And just go bigger in general, because one of the things that like actually kind of got me out of keeping reptiles a while back is I did a lot more with snakes back then. Is when you keep snakes in like kind of like a minimalistic setup, it's almost like, they're just kind of sitting there.
Yeah.
And it's, to me at least, it was like not as enjoyable.
Yeah.
And then suddenly I was like, okay, you know what? I have this big display I'm going to set up for our corn snake, who she was kept kind of minimalistically at the time. I'm gonna put her in there and see like how it goes, make it nice so like when people come in they see it as well and it looks nice. And honestly, the behavior difference is like night and day. Like there's the 2 corn snakes in there. Almost always at least one of them is out, like they're basking or they're cruising around. And even in like their hides, you walk by, they're popping out and checking on you.
That's awesome.
One of the things I did with that enclosure is there's like a birdhouse.
Yeah.
Elevated, and it's like they're always in the birdhouse.
Yeah.
I'm like obsessed with the idea of like arboreal hides now because of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I stole that idea from you too in my corn snake enclosure. Yeah. Yeah. So I have to give credit to you on that one. But yeah, it's funny. The one I used isn't great because it's got like one of those hinge doors that comes up. So if they go in or if she goes in, it's just like pushes the door out. So I need to figure that out eventually. Okay. So it's not great, but she's always like going in and out of there and like climbing all around the top of it. And she'll sit on the very top, like the roof. And it's, yeah, I love arboreal hides. Brenden and I both keep carpet pythons too. And
yeah,
I've got arboreal hides for my carpets and they live in that thing, you know?
Yeah.
So just feels more like what they would be doing in nature, you know?
And I mean, honestly, with corn snakes, those 2, like one of them's on a weight loss plan. So she does spend more time on the ground, and I think it's because she doesn't physically. It's hard for her to climb around.
Yeah.
But, our original corn snake, she's like almost never on the ground. If she's out, she's like in the branches. So like one of the things, like when I get a larger enclosure, the current one, there's like basically 2 feet of climbing space. I want to go up to like 4 feet.
Wow. Okay.
And like just seeing like how much time she spends up off the ground, and I see a lot of people with corn snakes. It's like, they can climb, but they don't need it.
Yeah.
I can't like consciously keep a corn snake in somewhere it can't climb anymore.
Yeah.
Because I just see like how much they're utilizing all that arboreal space.
Yeah.
And the other thing too is like corn snakes are like in the wild, they're major nest predators of birds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So obviously, like, some birds do nest on the ground, but a lot of birds don't. So clearly they're going up to get the birds.
Yeah. And it's something too where it's like with like rat snakes, like you always see pictures of them in the trees and like okay. But corn snakes, you tend not to see pictures of them in the trees, but where you do see pictures of them is like behind bark, like 4 or 5, 6 feet in the air or whatever. And so it's like maybe, like you said, that they're definitely going up and eating the nests and stuff, but maybe they're not spending a majority of their time up there, but they're still spending time, 4 or 5 feet up in the air, which, we can give, so
people thinking like, oh, it's an arboreal animal. They don't, or this one's not an arboreal animal. They don't need the climbing space. They're only climbing in the shrubs. And it's like, is your enclosure like taller than a small shrub?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's like 2 feet is nothing. Like, it's, especially if we're talking carpet pythons or anything, like they could be 50 feet up in a tree, You spend time on the ground too, but like, yeah, it got to at least be able to give like a significant amount where they can feel elevated and stuff like that. So that's awesome. Really quick, you mentioned substrate. What kind of substrate are you running in that enclosure?
God, trying to remember what I originally did. So I do top it off.
Okay.
I have not done I obviously go in there and I spot clean when I see something, but I haven't done like any major substrate changes. For the most part, I've been topping off, and it does like over time it does break down. Like I have pictures comparing and I should have saved some, but I have pictures comparing like a year apart, and it like literally drops down like 2-3 inches.
Yeah.
And I end up like usually I mix up like some type of like topsoil sand mix. The original mix, I think it was mostly just a topsoil sand. Okay. I don't do the same mixes obviously for all the enclosures. Like for the most part, I'm running a lot of like DIY mixes where I'm like trying different things together.
Yeah.
Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't.
Yeah. That's where we're at too. We just did an episode on that. And talked about our mixes and stuff too, but I'm sure those will change. And I talked about my hatred towards sand, just because I've had sometimes it can be too clumpy and you know, once it dries out, it's like really painful. But yeah, I don't have a great reason for my hatred for sand. But
another thing too is I do experiment a lot with like different substrate options that I haven't necessarily seen people use.
Okay.
And one that I've recently become kind of obsessed with, like you could definitely use it for like more like temperate or tropical setups, but I've been loving it for like more arid setups, is bonsai soil.
Interesting.
I'd never even thought of that.
And it's like the one I use is like the it's like Hoffman, I think the brand is, and it's primarily turf-face, which is like the if you ever got the planted aquarium substrate, the fluorite, it's the same material.
Okay.
They have expanded shale, which is like these little tiny shale bits, and also little bits of bark. So it's really, there's not even really any soil in there.
Yeah.
But you mix it in with like you mix it in with the substrates, and it definitely like helps a lot with drainage. And the thing I really like too now is when I do the arid setups, a lot of times like after I make the soil or the substrate, I'll go back and I use that as a top coating. And it just gives like a very like strong desert like vibe.
Yeah. That's very interesting. I'm looking it up now. I've never seen it before.
Yeah. Let me see, because I definitely have pictures of some of the more recent setups, because recently I've been updating a lot of our invertebrate setups because I have a little corner with like a tarantula and all those critters.
I've definitely expressed my fear of tarantulas on here before.
I tried keeping them, and I just couldn't do it, man.
Got to go up to Nick's place and get educated on those, because it just scared me a little bit. I don't know, man. Yeah, this soil is really interesting too. Nick can pull up a picture. You can definitely see it's, you know, would be very desert-like and would look really naturalistic and something like that. I see it now. I'm adding it.
All right. Yeah. So.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah. Obviously, there's fake plants in there, and that's just because on that small of a scale, doing an arid setup, you know, it's going to get kind of hard controlling humidity and watering the plants.
Yep.
Because that's only like an Exoterra 12 by 12.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say, I literally got the only reason I've been trying it is I was repotting a succulent one day that I had at our house, and I opened the bag. I got that because I was like, oh, this might work. Opened the bag, looked at it, and I'm like, wait. That's when the gears started rolling.
Yeah, the light bulb went off.
Yeah, that's awesome.
What do you have on the sides there? Is that just like cork flat? Or?
Yeah, that's just cork flats, like, you know, you get at like the craft store or something.
Yeah.
So this particular enclosure, the sides are cork flats. The back is there's a piece of Mopani wood. You can see the little hole that's there, but the actual background is the Exoterra stone desert. So
okay.
Kind of like the Zoom Ed excavator clay.
Yeah.
But I've started using that. I've used it also in like soil mixes as well, and I've found that I like the Exoterra product way better than the Zoom Ed one.
Gotcha. Good to know. I'm trying to plan. So like right now, all my leopard geckos are in like your standard paper towel in a tub, and I hate it. I hate going in there and looking at it, you know, just visually. And so I'd like to go definitely probably still tubs, but I'd like to go a little bit more naturalistic with the substrate and stuff. And I've heard of people mixing in that excavator clay into their substrates for their leopard geckos.
Yeah,
so
I have it on. It's actually mixed in with my the California king snake substrate in the Ed Center. Nice. And that substrate mix is going on like 3 years old, I think.
Wow.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's super cool.
Now if the you know, the plants don't necessarily always do great with the king snake, but
yeah. My Eastern king snake, I tried plants one time, and I was like, I'm not gonna try here anymore, because that was a painful experience.
I have mixed luck with the king snake. Now there are some plants I have that are like, they hold on, like I don't know how they're still alive. they still are. He like goes under them and rips them up, and they're sitting on the surface, still growing. And then I have other plants that it's like they're like impervious to the snake. The big one with the king snake that I've come to really like for arid setups, if you have like it's a larger one, is the ZZ plant. If you're
yeah.
That thing has been like bomb proof. He goes underneath it. Sometimes he'll pull up a bulb and it'll just keep like growing and the roots will like reattach.
Wow.
The only problem is it's like they get bigger. So it's like in this setup it works. But if you have like, maybe like a 40 breeder with the leopard gecko, it's probably going to get too tall for that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've seen those. I feel like, Brenden, we saw them at the Shed Aquarium. They had the ZZ plants in a couple of the enclosures. I thought that was really cool. I've also seen like snake plants be used, even though they're not. I guess they are kind of arid.
They're a weird plant.
Yeah.
Desert tropical setups, and I'm like, ow.
Yeah. Our local zoo has a lot of them in the arid setups. They're from Madagascar, aren't they? Or
I know they're from Africa. There probably are some species in Madagascar, I'd assume.
Yeah. So they're in that weird area where it's like humid, but it's also hot.
Mm-hmm.
So
the ZZ plant, like I have some as like potted plants at home too.
Mm-hmm.
And if anyone listening, if you're someone who has like you kill every single plant you touch, the ZZ plant is like completely bomb proof.
Nice.
You could stick that thing in a closet and forget about it for 3 months and it'll be taller.
Yeah, it'll be taller.
I tell people like I water it. Basically, when my rents due is when I water it.
Once a month.
That's how I remind myself to water it.
That's awesome.
Where is the picture I was going to share? The only problem I've had with the king snake and that plant.
While you're pulling that up, I have to use the restroom. I'm so sorry. I'll be right back.
All right.
You're good.
There we go. All right, I got the picture, so when he gets back, he can pop it up.
Yeah, I've been wanting to do some more arid setups, but I've got the tropical stuff pretty much down these days, but the arid stuff is still like so foreign to me, like plant wise and all that stuff.
Honestly, I enjoy doing the arid setups, and I think part of it is just because most of the species I work with are temperate to tropical.
Right.
So it's like I don't get the chance to do it, but that's like something I a lot more would like to do.
Mm-hmm.
I've been kind of enjoying it with the invertebrates because some of the invertebrates over there are all arid. So I'm like, okay, I'll do this little 5-gallon.
Yeah, you don't have to do it on a big scale. Yeah.
Yeah.
It definitely helps.
Yeah,
I don't really have, minus the leopard geckos, all my stuff's fairly tropical.
Yeah.
Like at least lizard wise. Like I have the coastals and I have like a single bear rat snake hanging around here, but
yeah, I was gonna say like a Baird's or like a Transpaco would be something I'd love to like try with like a more arid style setup somewhere down there.
I did I made like a 2-level rock wall in like a 3x2 black box cage for her. And man, the behavior change in that snake was unbelievable. Giving it like that height and that space to actually move around, it was freaking awesome.
So that's the only problem I've ever had with this snake in that plant. 100% he's trying to eat it.
I was gonna ask. It looks like he's trying to eat it.
And the funny thing is, it's like it wasn't like I was feeding him or messing around in there and moved it and he triggered him. It was the middle of summer camp, and my intern goes, "Nick, you want to look at this?" And I walked over, and he's constricting it and full on like chewing on the stem. And it's like, what even triggered you to do this? So,
that's a classic king snake behavior. Yeah. Wow. They would eat anything, I'm sure of it.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Apparently salad.
Apparently salad. Sorry, I didn't realize you guys couldn't. I did know, but I forgot that you couldn't share the screen.
Right.
So. No, that's funny. That's awesome, though. I think we should talk about the newt enclosure before we get into everything else, too, because that's another one of my favorites that you've got. We were talking a little bit about it earlier, but it's kind of a tropical vibe, and it's just awesome, man. Like we haven't talked about a ton about paludariums on this podcast yet, and I think paludariums scare people a lot of times because
they scare me too.
yeah. And I think it's the same reason that turtles kind of scare people. It's just when you add water to something, you know, it becomes a little bit more complex and a little bit harder to think about. But was this your first paludarium?
So I have a weird, like, sometimes I call it a paludarium, but I feel sometimes weird about it because if you actually go in there and look around, there isn't any true land area. So
okay,
it falls kind of more within the realm of riparium.
Yeah.
So for anyone listening that doesn't know, ripariums, basically there is plant growth above the water line, but there's no actual land area.
Okay.
So, you know, you could do that with literally just shoving a plant into a log and growing it, or having actual planters or something. But that's kind of what this is there's a lot of plant growth above the line. I've toyed around different ways with like actual paludariums, like our axolotl tiger salamander setup is kind of a paludarium. Like there is a water feature, but even that one gives me a hard time. I think the hardest thing with like an actual like paludarium when there's like actual land and water area is I feel like every single person I've ever seen make one, and every single time I've actually tried to make one, without fail, the water ends up on the land area.
Yeah. Separating the two is definitely difficult.
Yeah. The problem I have with, I've kind of gotten it with the salamander tank. So our salamander tank that we have here, it started out for a tiger salamander, but I ended up taking in some morphed axolotls. So they're axolotls that have gone through metamorphosis, and they look like tiger salamanders now.
That's crazy.
And recently I've also gotten into, from the same rescue, I've gotten into axolotl tiger salamander hybrids. So there's 5 of them living in there right now. At any time, 2 or 3 of them are popping out. But the problem I had is when I first set it up, I experimented a little bit with the substrate mix, and I decided to mix in some clay. And that's what ended up happening with the water feature is I had a lot of capillary action. I still do, where it pulls water out and over into the substrate.
Gotcha.
And the problem when I had the clay is it would not dry out or drain. So I ended up having to pull all the substrate out and do a different mix. And it still does that, but it basically goes straight into the drainage layer.
Yeah.
And I have a PVC pipe in there. I can just throw an air line down and siphon the water out. So I do that like once a week.
Gotcha. Okay.
For the newt setup, so I do actually, that was one of the things I was really good about recording when I first did it. So I have pictures from the actual build.
Nice. This is great.
We need to make this a standard here, Jack.
Yeah.
All right. So there's the actual tank. So the tank's a 29 gallon.
Nice. Okay.
And this was kind of my first experiment with drilling glass. So this will kind of go into like the turtle care too, but I think learning to drill glass is like a really, really helpful skill to do when you're working with aquatics, or when you're working with aquatics that also need a lot of airspace. Because one of the biggest pains, like especially early on when I was working with turtles, is like you have a canister filter, but you have the water level lower, and the canister like doesn't want to run because the water level is not high enough. So once you drill the glass, a lot of it it helps, because then you just put the inlet to the filter right down at the bottom, so you don't have to worry about that. But so with this setup, the plan I had is originally I wanted to do a moss wall in here, and I kind of stole an idea from Surfer Design, and it was one of his little terrariums where he was making a moss wall, and I kind of expanded on that to do an actual like full-on like animal enclosure.
Mm-hmm.
So basically what happens is there's the inlet to the canister filter is down here, and this is the actual outlet, which is a PVC pipe that runs the entire length of the enclosure and turns into a spray bar with a bunch of holes in there. So when the water comes back in, it sprays out. Just kind of give an idea what.
Are the holes in the back of the tube or of the PVC?
So that I'm pretty sure I actually left loose so I could play with it, because I wanted to see like what the flow is actually like.
Yeah.
So I could like point it all the way to the back. I could move it a little bit out.
Gotcha.
I haven't had access to it in like a year and a half now, so
Taking over.
But let's see. This is basically when I had it set up. So the idea was this would all be underwater.
Mm-hmm.
What I wanted was like an open area with sand that gives them a lot of space to move around.
Mm-hmm.
But this was where I was going to do a lot of aquatic growth, as well as doing like plants that grow on surfaces like Anubias and Bucephalandra.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of what the actual like hardscape turned into. No, too soon for that. Where are you? Okay. So this is like when I very first set it up.
Okay.
Actually, I skipped a picture, but it's all right. So basically, what the actual background itself is I got filter foam, like
Mm-hmm.
the black coarse filter foam, and siliconed it to the back glass.
Mm-hmm.
Made a hole for the PVC pipe to come through. And the idea that I stole from Serpa Design is he basically took a razor blade and made a grid pattern in the foam.
Okay.
And what he did with that is he took moss and just shoved them into the grid.
Okay.
And basically the way this works now is when water obviously goes into the filter through here, and when it comes back in, it sprays onto the background and drips down through the moss. Which it kind of, the other nice thing is it kind of adds extra filtration, because this is basically a big giant wet dry filter.
That's awesome. Is that just Java moss?
It is just Java moss. So this is actually a video, so you can kind of see how it was working when I first.
Oh, it's so cool.
Wow. That's awesome.
For reference, because we didn't talk about the newts. The newts that are in here, they're Spanish rib newts. So Florides wattle, I think something along those lines is the scientific name.
Okay.
But basically, they're a very large newt that comes from Spain, Portugal, and Morocco. And the reason they're called rib newts is their defense is when a predator comes after them, they literally stab their ribs through their skin.
Oh, wow.
And their skin is like, they are poisonous to some degree, like all newts are, and basically coats the rib in toxin. And when the predator bites them, the ribs are sharp. It stabs the predator and pushes the toxin into their mouth.
Holy shit.
What?
How metal is that?
That's crazy.
Because they're newts, they have crazy healing ability, so they completely heal.
Wow.
That is wild.
If you ever see one, they like have these orange dots or bumps running down their sides, and apparently scientists used to think it was like, because that's where the ribs come out, they thought it was like a sheath and there was a hole there. And then when they went and checked it, they're like, oh no, they're full on stabbing themselves.
That's absurd, man. That's like the coolest thing ever. I need them now, just based off that fact. I need some of these.
But the reason I have them is, one, they're just a species I've always wanted to work with.
Mm-hmm.
And I was, having newts or any amphibians here to talk about with like kids and adults is always a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing I like about them is a lot of salamanders and newts are really temperature sensitive. So there's people who over the summer, they literally keep their newts in refrigerators because they want it at like 50 degrees. This species, because they're from like Spain and stuff, they're actually really tolerant to heat. Our AC actually went out like 2 weeks ago, and it got up to 80 degrees in here, and I didn't have any problems with them.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah, which a lot of like newts and salamanders that actually would like kill them.
Yeah.
So I just wanted them for that hardiness. Plus, they do get really large. The males, so my male, he's currently about 8 inches. My female that I have, she's immature still, but they can get up to like a foot.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
They get around axolotl size, though probably not as like heavily built as an axolotl. I actually always tell people that they're the better axolotl. Their care is like almost identical, but they're like way hardier.
Yeah, and cooler because they can take their ribs out of their skin.
Through their skin.
Yeah.
So that's that's another video, but you can see as
that's so cool, man.
Is one of them an albino?
So that one actually, so this is one thing that emphasize is when you're doing hardscapes with aquatic animals, careful about any gaps that are in the hardscape. So this was, so I used to have 2 males. So this is my normal male, and I had a leucistic male.
Okay.
This was like months into like this enclosure being set up. He actually found a gap in the rockwork and got stuck in there, and I ended up losing him.
Oh,
wow.
So
I've had that happen with a turtle before. So
yeah, so that was like I was not thrilled about that, obviously, but I was able to block up that hole and haven't had any issues since then. And that was well over I think it was almost like a year and a half ago at this point.
Gotcha.
But
awesome, man.
The reason I'm showing this is this tank is like changed a lot over time. So one of the things, like you'll notice, I ended up adding some Ficus pumila, and over time the whole background slowly changed from a moss wall, which I actually didn't mind, because one of the problems I had with the moss wall is as the moss grew out, the layers underneath started dying and it started falling off the wall. So
interesting. Okay.
I used to trim back the ficus to try to keep it from messing with the moss wall, but when I started having that issue, I basically just kind of let it take over. And where I'm at now, I want to see the most recent picture I have of it.
There's so many good pictures here too.
I know. Sounds like we have so much to talk about.
There we go. So that's the current.
Oh yeah, that's insane.
So it's still dripping back there. It's, the ficus is literally just growing in sponge. And I was gonna say I have the plant over here is a peace lily that's kind of taken over. I have to hack that back all the time. And there's also a syngonium there, and it's hard to make out there, but it's actually an anubias that's growing out of the water.
Yeah, right there to the left of the syngonium.
Yeah. That one actually, every now and then it throws out a bloom too, which is kind of cool.
Wow. That's so cool.
But one of the things I ended up switching up doing as well is, well, for one, I for some reason could not grow floating plants in there for the longest time. And then one day duckweed just took off in there. So I don't know what ended up changing at one point, but it's just a completely different vibe now, where it's more of like a very heavily overgrown jungle.
Yeah.
And then I also went in and where there was sand, one of the problems I had with the sand is I had acquired like a planted aquarium soil back there on the raised level. The newts kept knocking it over, and it would mix with the sand, and I didn't like the look. So I just went with leaf litter. Yeah,
it looks awesome. It's very natural. What's your opinion on duckweed?
I love it and hate it.
Yes.
The weird thing is I have floating plants in a bunch of my aquarium setups. Every single setup seems like a different floating plant ends up winning out, and I don't know what the variations are. So in here, I'll put in other stuff. Duckweed's the only one that holds on. Like the other ones end up fizzling out. In the salamander setup, their little pond, the plant that seems to do really well in there is frog bit. When I had the alligator snapper inside, his water lettuce would win out. And then Amanda, who is my girlfriend, she's also the clinic director in there in our reptile rehabber. She has a African dwarf frog tank up in her office, and that one's Sardinia. So I don't. Every single tank has a different floating plant that somehow wins out. I do add all of them in the beginning, and then just kind of
see what happens.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah, that's my opinion on duckweed too. I've got it in almost all of my turtle setups, and it just, I've got this one, I guess it now after talking, it's a riparian, which is cool. But yeah, I've got duckweed in there, and it just grows like astronomically fast, and I pretty much have to, maintain it and pull duckweed out once a week, maybe more, to like have any sort of light going down, because it's just choked out otherwise. And so
I could remove all the duckweed in there, and a week later it's back like that.
Mm-hmm. How often are you removing duckweed?
When I feel like it.
Yeah. Gotcha.
It's easy because like that tank is actually like right next to our turtle pond in the Ed Center, and I do have like some goldfish and a carp in there.
Yeah.
So I just, whenever I take out all the duckweed, I throw it in there, and I come in the next day, it's all gone because they just eat it.
Yeah. That's what I do too. I've got some goldfish outside that I throw the duckweed to, and they're happy about it. So, but it's constant. And then I also try to feed it to, some of the turtles that'll eat it as well, which is good. But and then I'll end up having a duckweed overgrowth in their enclosure, and that's how we've got duckweed in every turtle enclosure that I own. So. Which is painful. But
the other thing too about that, this setup here is so it's been set up since the tail end of 2021, I think. And I've cleaned out the filter, I think 3 times.
Wow.
So I've cleaned out the filter 3 times, and then I do a water change when I feel like it.
Mm-hmm.
Literally earlier this week, I did a water change on it, and it was like the first one I've done this year. And it's literally like you test the water, it's like there's nothing.
Yeah.
The plants just suck everything out of it. It's crazy.
Yeah, we had a little stint where we talked about the plants, like especially the immersed plant growth in aquarium, and just how good it is at removing, excess nitrates and stuff. So
my alligator snapping turtle, when he was a hatchling, so obviously he's here at the facility now, but I first started him at my house, and his enclosure was entirely run by some immersed plants that I had growing in cork, like floating cork bark, and 2 air stones, and everything was at 0 in his tank.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's like, obviously, it's a small turtle, but it was kind of nuts that there wasn't any actual filtration going on in the tank, but it's like nothing ever built up.
Yeah, that's amazing. And even at a small age, those alligator snappers are messy, especially when they're eating a lot of fish and stuff like that. It can get pretty gross. So that's very impressive.
Yeah. And the other thing, that was my first kind of venture into doing like true blackwater setups, because I just decided to set up try to him in like a blackwater setup, which I actually, if you guys don't mind, I have a picture of that setup as well.
I would love to talk about that setup. That was also one of my favorites. Brenden, are you prepared for all this turtle talk we're about to have?
Dude, I am actually very excited. I don't know what you guys are saying, but I am stoked on it.
There we go. Yeah, so that's...
Oh, yeah.
So that was a 20 long aquarium. And substrate-wise, the only substrate in there was actually sphagnum moss.
Wow, okay.
And I would add like catalpa leaves and Rubio's tea and stuff to like kind of bring in the tannins and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going for like the blackwater look, but I wasn't prepared for just like how blackwater it actually got.
Yeah.
If you did a pH test on it, it actually was, the pH was 5.
Wow.
For a normal aquarium, pH is like around 7.
Yeah.
Here around, or in my area, the water comes out of the faucet at like 7.8.
Wow. So you went real far down. Wow.
Yeah. But the interesting thing I discovered is filtration in an aquarium. It's the nitrogen cycle.
Yep.
The nitrogen cycle completely breaks down when the pH is under 6.
Interesting. So what do you mean?
The nitrifying bacteria can't live at that pH.
Okay.
What does happen though is apparently ammonia in very low pH changes over to ammonium, and ammonium is one of the most readily available nitrogen sources for plants.
Oh wow!
Wow.
So the plant, like the floating or the immersed plants I had in there, they had like a field day.
So you don't even need the nitrogen cycle because it's already ready for plants to consume it.
It just kind of like was a perfect storm where I had pothos in there, I had syngoniums, had monsteras. So it's basically, we have a bunch of house plants at home, and I would just take cuttings, get little cork flats, poke holes, and then shovel plants in and throw them in there. And the roots would go nuts, and that's actually what kept the tank clean.
Wow. That's so awesome.
Yeah. Obviously that wouldn't work with like every turtle species, because it's, what I tell people is, you want an animal that's actually adapted to like black water environments, which you go down to like the bayous in Louisiana, that's kind of the habitat you have there. I remember I was talking to somebody in one of the online forums or the Facebook groups for alligator snappers, and one of the places they test the pH was like 4.
Jeez.
So it's like, you want an animal that like that's their natural environment. You don't want, I was talking to someone once, I joked, I'm like, you don't do that with like your axolotl, because that's how you pickle your axolotl.
Yeah. No kidding. But I can imagine something like a spotted turtle or even potentially a painted turtle doing really well in a super black water setup. Mata, that would be a dream species right there for sure. That would be awesome in something like that. Yeah, it's interesting too, because like you were saying, alligator snapping turtles, coming from Louisiana and some of those places down there, but like I'd be intrigued to see the different ways like they handle it. Like if you were talking about like an Apalachicola or a Swanniensis or something like that, where
I know in Florida, all the water down there is like hard water because their rock is all like fossilized coral.
Yeah, so it's almost like a completely different aquatic environment for them. But I mean, majority of the alligator snapping turtles in captivity are all Temikii, or say that. So
they're all like Mississippi Basin, basically.
Yeah. So this is the kind of habitat they're getting. But yeah, I was watching a Garden State Tortoise recently, and they have this huge aquascape pond that they put their big male alligator snapping turtle in, and looked awesome in there. But I think theirs is either an Apalachicola or a Swanniensis. So that kind of stream creek environment would be more so what it would be suited towards anyway.
Yeah, I mean, eventually with him, I would like to go like a really big pond. Obviously, he's in the stock tanks now, which we'll talk about in a bit. But that's basically, I'm waiting until he's kind of like raccoon proof.
Yeah.
I jokingly tell people I want to wait until like it's a scenario where the raccoon was the one who made a mistake to go.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. It's messing with the wrong pond there. Yeah. Yeah. I feel like mine's like 10 inches now, I want to say. Okay. I feel like he's pretty safe from raccoons. Obviously, he wouldn't probably be doing too much damage to them, but also, and we talked about this privately as well, but like the stock tank is kind of a hard situation for a raccoon to navigate and come out of there with a prey item, just because of how steep the walls are, and
there's no like water like shallow going to deep. It's basically just straight plunge.
Yeah, exactly, which helps with that kind of thing. So
yeah, I mean he's getting to a size too where it's like, I think if any raccoon like actually gets a hold of them, they're going to be like, I don't want to mess with this. Like, I don't think it's predator proof, but he's getting there.
Yeah.
He's 8 inches now.
Yeah.
Which he had a really big growth spurt to start off with, but he has slowed down to like an inch per year, like the last 2 years.
Yeah, that's where mine's at too. He's slowed down quite a bit. I think we were actually messaging back and forth about.
Yeah, because you were like, wait, how much did yours grow?
Yeah, because mine's like he's probably like 5 or 6 now, and he's like at 10 inches. And I I have no basis for this assumption, but I think he's a female. So,
Okay.
So I do think he's slowing down because of that. I have no reason to say why. I have this gut feeling that it's a female. So
yeah.
But that would make sense. But yeah.
It was funny with mine because I was like, I'd always hear people like, you want to grow them out slow. You don't want to grow them out fast because it's not good for their health. And I'm like sitting there and I'm like, I'm feeding him like twice a week and he's like growing like 2 inches over like 6 months.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like, what am I doing?
Yeah. But it makes sense though, like for something to be that large at its adult size, like it's got to go through some pretty drastic growth spurts when it's young. Yeah. Otherwise, it's just never going to hit that size.
And it also makes sense too, like I guess when you're like a tiny little hatchling, like rapid growth until you're like, you know, around this size, 8 inches, you're off the menu for a lot of things at that point.
100%. Especially just even like fish, like you think about a largemouth bass, that could definitely take down a baby gator snapper until it's probably 4 or 5 inches. You know, might be a painful meal going down, but it could definitely eat it.
Yeah,
that's awesome. No, I love this setup. The Blackwater stuff is always really cool. Brenden, you've got a Blackwater beta setup, don't you?
I did for a little while. It's the one in the gecko room now. I kind of switched it back, but because like the wood I had in there was growing some weird, gooey, spongy like a mushroom or something. I don't know. It was growing something weird on it, and like it was like oil spotting the water and stuff. I don't know what it was.
I don't have pictures from this setup, but I don't know what it was. There was some type of fungus that was growing on the glass in the setup that I would get every now and then.
Really?
And the weird thing is it wasn't like a big patch.
Yeah.
It really was like a spider web like pattern.
Whoa, wow.
Like almost like if you ever looked in like if you have like the fungus that grows in like terrestrial setups, like growing along the glass in there, it was almost like
wild.
So I don't know what it was. It clearly wasn't an issue. I just assumed it was some part of like, you know, I had all that sphagnum moss in there. So it was like, there was organic material decomposing in there, I guess.
Yeah. And we talked about this. I can't remember what episode we talked about like fungus in a terrarium from a terrarium perspective and how, you know, sometimes people would, you know, maybe freak out seeing mushrooms grow or something, but it's a good sign. It's a sign that your ecosystem is functioning properly. For the most part. I mean, you could probably have some bad funguses in there, like mold and things like that. But if you're getting like mushrooms, it's probably a good sign. But I've never thought about it from an aquatic perspective. And
I don't either. But it's like there are aquatic funguses like that. You know, with my diamondback terrapins, that's one thing. Like now they're in fresh water, I kind of keep an eye on for them because they get a skin fungus when they're or they're more prone to a skin fungus when they're kept in fresh water rather than like brackish.
Yeah, I've heard about that. And that's why like people need to start them on brackish or keep them brackish. Is that like, it's actually on their skin versus like a normal shell rot type of thing?
It's honestly like when they get in small doses, it's like very superficial. And it's like you put them in salt, like in a salt bath, and it basically like cures it very quickly or gets rid of it. I personally haven't had issues with it. Part of it is, I guess, when they're in fresh water, they're much more sensitive to the water quality.
Yeah.
So you have to be like on your game with the water quality. Whereas in brackish water, you have a little bit. Obviously, you don't want to keep them in a cesspool, but you have a little bit more leeway with the parameters and everything.
Gotcha. Yeah, and that makes sense too, especially with them being similar kind of to map turtles and map turtles needing that level of water quality to keep them healthy.
Yeah,
that's interesting. Okay, cool. Well, let's stick with this snapping turtle now that we're on it. We can kind of walk through like kind of your progressions between enclosures because you've done a couple of different setups for them.
Yeah, I was thinking, so basically from here, actually this is the next setup. So I kind of stuck with like the Blackwater setup. So this is when he finally moved into my office.
That's so cool.
And this is one thing that I think definitely like is nice with turtles. Like obviously this isn't the prettiest thing, but if you can build some type of like topper for your aquarium, it just makes keeping them way easier because one, you get more water volume because you can actually fill the tank up where versus like having the water shallow, but then it also just, it helps with your filtration so much easier.
Yes.
Rather than like, because all these aquarium filters are built to work with an aquarium that's full of water.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, rather than fighting it by trying to make it work on an aquarium half filled, you got the aquarium fully filled. So this one, believe it or not, this actually is the 29-gallon that turned into the new tank.
Really?
Yeah. I didn't even think about that until now, but yeah. And this was, there. Honestly, it was ran by a hang on the back filter. So
nice.
It kind of just make it out there, but I had a slot cut out of here that the filter fit into. And then obviously the topper itself kind of kept, not that alligator snapping turtles like to climb out of the water, but if he decided to, this kind of kept him in there.
Mm-hmm.
And basically there's lots of pothos cuttings that I just kind of shoved in there.
Awesome. Yeah, it's funny. I have a topper on my 55 that I've got in my bedroom, and before I built that, my Florida red belly was basking up on like the light, basically on top of the thing. I was like, "How'd you even get up there? I don't understand it." But
I tell everyone, I'm like, don't underestimate turtles.
Yeah,
surprisingly good climbers.
Yes, yeah, very impressive.
Yeah, to give you kind of like an idea of the setup. This was cool. Also, so I did have them in the previous tank, but these here, they're hard to make out because of the glare. That's the one downside to black water is it's impossible to get a picture of the tank.
Yeah.
But these are cypress sneeze, and
awesome.
Honestly, I just really love the look of cypress sneeze.
Yeah.
Kind of the inspiration. So obviously up in Pennsylvania, like we do have some bald cypress growing around. I do have some in pots out back that
nice.
I'm planning on putting in a pond on the property, but we don't have like actual cypress swamps.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the places I visit is like southern Delaware. That's like the northernmost reaches of like actual cypress swamps, and I go down there, and that's one place I definitely go to, and I get a lot of inspiration. Mm-hmm. So when I built some of the like this enclosure, like when I built it, that's kind of like what I was looking at and what I envisioned.
Okay, that's awesome. Yeah,
and if you are someone who's interested in doing like, because obviously one of the problems with keeping turtles and doing like actual like displays with them is they are super destructive, especially snapping turtles. They're like bulldozers.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, these cypress knees, there's a currently I use tiles, but at this point in time, this was actually a terracotta like saucer.
Okay.
Basically just drilled holes through the bottom and drilled it to it. And once you put the substrate on it, the turtle, like at most they can kind of shove the whole structure back and forth a little bit, but they can't actually like take the log and drag it all the way over there or something.
Yeah.
So that's kind of one thing, like when doing setups for turtles, I've kind of figured out to like keep your hardscape where you want it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, lock it down.
Yeah. And then I've also I can show that a bit later, but I've also figured that doing something similar to actually make do-it-yourself basking areas.
Yeah, we should definitely talk about that.
Yeah, because that's definitely an issue.
Yeah, basking areas are always the hardest part. They're always painful.
This was the next upgrade. So this is actually that's before the plants took off in there. But this is one of those, like, I don't think they even sell them anymore. Someone donated this to us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like one of those like 40 gallons that have like this half is only half the glass and has a little plastic thing so you can pop on and hang in the back filter. And we weren't really using it for anything. And then I kind of realized, I'm like, okay, we have an alligator snapping turtle who isn't the strongest swimmer.
Mm-hmm.
Just set him up like this, and this is kind of what I came up with. So the plants back there, those are a dwarf like papyrus.
Nice.
And this is one trick that definitely works for destructive animals that'll dig up the plants, is they are actually just in terracotta pots with fluorite.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And they've actually, I would say they actually did like really take off with that. And it was nice because he couldn't like get in there and like dig up the whole plant or anything.
Yeah, because it was like too small of a space for him to. Gotcha.
And then you'll also see there are lots of roots in there. That's because I used to have I forget if it was a pothos or a philodendron growing on the shelf next to it, and it would hang down and hit the water. And as soon as it hit the water, all the roots would come
out. Freaked out and found freedom.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love this setup.
Let's see. No, there's the whole overview. So he did have a basking area. He never used it, but
yeah.
I offered it.
I had a period, and this is, part of my growth as a hobbyist, but I had a period where I got some shell rot on my alligator snapping turtle, and it's all been resolved for quite some time now, but I had this issue with him, and he actually, that was the only time I've ever seen him bask, is he would bask every day. And I guess he just knew that if he was going to bask, it would get rid of it, which was a really interesting thing. But every day he would be basking. Then I'd dry dock him and do the whole betadine and all that kind of treatment. But it was really weird to see him basking like that.
And the thing is, it's like they do bask in the wild. I've seen pictures of them basking. Who posts pictures of it all the time is Carl James from Texas Turtles.
Yes. Yeah.
He posts pictures of that all the time. And he's actually in the Facebook groups for snapping turtles. He's a very big proponent of offering your snapping or your alligator snapping turtles basking areas because of just how often he actually sees them basking, which is him and Greg Bashir from Greg Haven. They're two people I always like to listen to about alligator snapping turtles because they're actually people who work with them in the wild.
Yeah.
Versus, a lot of people who keep them, that's their only experience with them. So if you go online, you'll see tons of people who say oh, they don't need basking, but obviously they are recording them basking. So I think it's kind of you should at least offer it.
Yeah. 100%. It's funny because alligator snapping turtles are a species that I feel like people are relatively familiar with. It's like an animal that's always in the zoo, and people have just seen them, so they know what an alligator snapping turtle is and stuff like that. But it's really funny how little we know about them, because of just how secretive they are.
Well, it's also people who say oh, they're just they're a rock. They sit around, they don't do anything all day. But I'll say mine does do that. He'll go and he'll just sit in a corner. But it's there's times he perks up and he's on it. He's I walk into the room and he decides he's hungry. He spins around. When he was still inside, he's sitting at the glass. When he was actually in this enclosure, every single time I'd come in my office, my desk that I'm sitting at now was over here, and I'd be there doing emails or something, and I turn around and he'd be sitting in this corner, loring at me with his tongue. Every single time I came in my office.
Feed me, human. That's funny. Yeah, and you can see him right there at the front.
Yeah.
Pine cone looking.
Which actually, so this is him when he was in there, and I was really big on the leaf litter in there. For species like this, I am a really big fan of offering them leaf litter, at least when they're smaller. As he got bigger, it was kind of hard because he would kick it all up and it'd get stuck in the filter.
Yeah.
But especially when they're little like that, because they're honestly, they're a really shy turtle, which I think a lot of people don't expect with because if you work with a common snapping turtle, their personality is very in your face.
Yeah.
I tell people when I work, because I have the common snapping turtle too, you can put your hands in the enclosure with him and move stuff around. He's not going to mess with you. Usually I take the common snapping turtle out before I do anything.
Yeah.
He'll 100% nail you.
You'll lose a finger doing that.
Yeah. But I think honestly offering the leaf litter and all the cover and everything is part of when I'd come in, he was right there at the glass. It just made him a lot more bold.
Yeah.
Because you see some people who do setups online, oh, I got a baby alligator snapping turtle, and it's a tank. There's 3 inches of water, and then it's all sand and a rock.
Yeah. Yeah. I won't say I didn't do that.
Yeah.
Guilty.
But I was gonna say this was obviously because partly he was in my office, so I spent a lot of time in there with him. But he was like super active. Like I'd always see him cruising around. I'd always see him like checking out what I'm doing and stuff. And it was just interesting because you always hear people saying like they're not an active turtle at all.
Yeah. Mine's very active.
I mean, honestly, even now that I've moved him outside into the stock tanks, during the day he's hiding. If I go out there after dark and shine a light in there, he's out there cruising around. He's doing stuff.
Yep. I always feed mine at night because he's like more apt to like realize that it's like feeding time and like know what's going on versus, waiting for the fish to kind of get its scent over to him and then waiting for him to wake up and smell it, and a much longer process where at night it's like he's on it right away.
Yeah. I'm gonna say skim through. Yeah, I was gonna say just a lot of pictures of him.
That's awesome.
It's just very interesting because you'd see a lot of like, natural behavior. He'd hunker down. He was like watching on. He basically would like move through the leaf litter. Like he'd be in one spot and pull his head in. You just see like a wave of the leaf litter. He'd pop up somewhere else. And it's like, awesome. That's what they're doing out in the wild.
Yeah.
Then, if you're keeping mud turtles and stuff, this is like, that's a permanent setup you could do for them.
Yeah. 100%.
And this is, no, where is it? This is what he ended up getting upgraded to. So we moved from like the half 40 to a full 40. And this is like where I was doing drilling again, which definitely helps a lot. And the other thing, the reason why I was doing it with him is one of the reasons, it wasn't one of the reasons I was upgrading him, but like right before I upgraded him, he actually started biting the heater that was in the tank and actually broke it.
Oh, jeez.
Anyone who's like worked with like snapping turtles or does work with them, they have kind of a reputation for chewing on things they shouldn't.
Yeah.
So at this point, I kind of stopped giving him a heater, but also I didn't want any filter parts in the tank for him to decide to start chewing on. So my solution was basically drill it, and there are like, some hard plastic things in there, but nothing he can actually like really get a hold of and break, because, when you have a canister filter, the parts in there are kind of flimsy.
Yeah. Cheap plastic. Yeah, that's a skill I still need to learn, is drilling.
It's scary. It's not as hard as you'd think. Once you do it, you're like, okay.
The key is just going really slow with it.
Yeah, and also start with a tank. You're not like worried about losing.
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
Be like, all right, I'm going to drill my 200 for the first time I'm drilling. Yeah, this is before I added like substrate water.
Wow.
This is like the basking platform I offered him. This one actually, I think I kept. I'll remember when I see it in the water, but I think I kept this one kind of. No, it did come above the water. I was trying to remember if I kept it under the water, or is it just kind of shallow water or above. This did come above the water, but basically a piece of tile drilled to the bottom. I don't put it directly on the glass anymore. I haven't had issues, but basically when he outgrew this setup, I moved the common snapping turtle into here, and she used to drag that thing all over the place, and you'd hear the screws dragging along the glass. So now I always put egg crate light diffuser underneath these.
Gotcha. Just building anxiety every time you hear the sound.
I know that the bottom's gonna blow out. Yeah, but that's what this setup ended up looking like. He actually didn't spend too much time on there because you can see in there he was already getting pretty big.
Mm-hmm. So that's that dwarf papyrus again, and then what's the other plant in there?
I basically pulled it out, and I forget how I did the plant. Oh, okay, that's how I did the planters. So this here is, I believe this was a rotala.
Okay.
So this is like its immersed form rather than submerged form. Because like a lot of people who keep aquariums, this is like a popular aquarium plant.
Yeah.
But these are actually kind of cool. If you go on Etsy, there's a shop called Pothos Carry.
Yeah.
And they basically make little hang-on planters, like a bunch of different styles for aquariums. And this I actually gave a try. And they did really well. This particular model, I do have some of the other models. It's literally just you stick cuttings in there. I did have issues eventually with the plastic snapping, unfortunately, but it was really cool because they're basically just these little net pots that slip into holes, and the plant's roots like can actually grow out of it. So
that's another thing I stole from you because you posted that, and I bought some.
Yeah.
But I used it in one of my slider tanks at the time. I had 150 that eventually broke on me, but I had it in there, and I had like egg crate around it. So because it was like one of the larger like rectangular ones, so I had the egg crate around it, so you couldn't get up on top of it and then get out because I didn't have like a full barrier around it. But he got out. He fell like 4 feet down into another turtle enclosure that I had down below. And I was like, how is this possible? So I had to remove the whole thing. But I was like, I can't outsmart you here. But
yeah, but that's kind of like how it looks from above. And that is all water lettuce. I've come to so this is just regular water lettuce like you would get from the pond store.
Interesting.
I'm convinced that like dwarf water lettuce doesn't actually exist, and it's just water lettuce growing at different like lightings inside. Like I'm probably wrong, but like if you take this and stick it outside, it'll shoot off a new plant and it'll literally grow to a full-size water lettuce.
That's crazy.
It would do well in whatever tank I did. It's just the amount of light it got determined how big it would get. It was it's really weird.
It's kind of like pothos with their leaf size.
Like I have water lettuce outside right now, and it's literally descended from all this water lettuce. It's like I've never bought water lettuce since I got like 3 plants like 4 years ago.
That's crazy. I wish that was a species we could keep here, but that and hyacinth are both illegal, which I understand. But
yeah, and then this is basically what he upgraded to before he moved out. So this was like a 75, and for this I was going more of the river kind of style, like you would see like more like Georgia, Florida, and stuff with them.
Gotcha. That's awesome. How was the filter done in that one? I see a little.
So this one, I forget where it's from, but it's like an internal sump. And it's basically like you get the parts and you just kind of silicone it into place.
Mm-hmm.
It probably would have worked better if it wasn't for an alligator snapping turtle. If you were just having fish.
Yeah.
I did get this. So this was actually supposed to be for like a 40 breeder, but this is a 75. So it's the same width. It was just shorter. So I figured it would give more of a gap for like air and stuff. So this particular setup, I actually didn't offer him a basking area at the time. And now that he's outside, I do have a basking area for him again. But there was a lid on here, so I just didn't have it on there when I took the picture. But yeah, it looks great for the first like month I had him in there, and then he decided to move everything around.
Classic.
Yeah.
What kind of lighting and stuff are you using on all these?
So honestly, for all the setups that have plants in, the lighting I use for the plants are Nick Crew LED lights.
Gotcha.
They're cheap aquarium light that they're all over Amazon, and honestly, I love them.
Yeah. I've had a lot of good success with some of the cheaper Amazon lights. I've got some that I've had for going on 3 years now, and I haven't had any issues, which I feel like is a long run time for some of these, cheap ones. But
yeah, I think the first one I bought was for our tree frog setup we have here, and that I still have that light. It's still going.
That's awesome.
I've never I haven't had to replace any of them.
Wow. Hell yeah.
That's
Love
awesome.
that.
Obviously the only downside is like when you do like put a UVB fixture, it's not like the Arcadia Jungle Dawns where you can like daisy chain them to each other. So, more plugs, but
Yeah, we're huge fans of the Arcadia products because they're great. But I also think that like the Jungle Dawn gives off a different kind of light than like a typical aquarium light, and so it's like if you're lighting an aquarium, sometimes I would prefer to use the aquarium light just because it makes the water look more natural, if that even makes sense. But
yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. So from here he went into the tub.
Yeah, from here. So he was in there for about a year or so, and finally reached a point. It's like, okay, you gotta go outside. And him and the common snapping turtle, which the common snapping turtle, she kind of just had a very minimalistic setup, just because you were able to get away with a lot more with him. She was like she's a bulldozer. you couldn't keep anything in there with her.
Yeah.
So now that would be down this way. So what I ended up doing for them was 250-gallon stock tanks. So do I not actually have a picture of all of them just sitting there? I guess not. Have pictures of parts of them, just not the whole thing. But where should I start? So we'll go here because this is give you an idea. So these are the 2 stock tanks. So 150 gallons. And I've been trying to plan this because the trickiest part is figuring out where on the property to put them. And then the next trickiest part was figuring out electricity and a top. So I ended up finding a spot that was open, and I ended up running electricity myself all the way over there. So you can kind of see the gravel there. There's like I basically got a pond hose buried like a couple inches down with an extension cord running through there all the way to over here. And the top itself is basically a mix of gardening wire. So I think it was like I got so it's coated vinyl on galvanized steel, and it's like 2 feet by 25 foot roll. Was able to do both setups. And the actual structure itself is basically I went along and drilled holes in the stock tank itself and ran gardening stakes. And then basically just wrapped the whole thing in it. And I did, there we go, these galvanized clamps. So these are like clamps in rabbit cage. And then when it was when it was attached to the gardening stakes, I just used zip ties.
Gotcha.
There is one gardening stake also running across the top that just kind of gives the top support like a little bit of more structure. So if anything did decide to climb on top, it's not like the whole thing's just going to cave in.
Sure.
And the door itself is basically, there's another wire section there, and it has the galvanized clamps here that kind of work like hinges. Okay. And the actual exposed wire, I have this plastic things that I don't even know what you technically call them, but they do make them specifically for like rabbit cages and stuff, but I have not had an easy time actually finding it. So I did actually find someone online who recommended you go to Staples and you get the little booklets that you make for like reports that have like the little plastic clamp that hold everything together, and you basically take the plastic clamps and use them.
Oh wow,
interesting. Okay.
So basically that's just so if I reach in there, I'm not shredding myself on the cutted wire.
Yeah.
And what's holding it on is literally just like little clips like you would use for like a dog leash or something.
Okay.
So
that's awesome. Yeah, I feel like making a door. I watched a video recently that I think Camp Kennan put out of going to the Turtle Sources property.
That's where I kind of got the idea.
Really? Okay, gotcha. So yeah, we're on the same wavelength there. But the way he's done it is like you could only have figured that out through like years of experience and like really figuring it out, because even I was looking just for that wire and I would have no idea. Like I would have to order the wire in order to like see if it's right.
Well, this as I was building this whole thing, it was stressing me out because the one thing I hate about stock tanks is they're all ovals.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, I consider myself somewhat of like a handyman where I can get the job done, but building anything oval shaped is an absolute pain.
Yes.
Like, it's like, why can't you just be a rectangle?
Everyone's life easier.
Yeah, but then I ended up like kind of seeing that, and then like a light bulb went off, because the only way I was thinking of doing wire, because I wanted it. Obviously, you could do it like completely flat, but it doesn't. Like, I would have to keep the water level lower to offer any masking, and it would be tougher to have like plants growing out of the water. So I wanted it raised, and the only way I could think about doing that is making a wooden structure and then attaching the wire to it. So I was kind of happy to kind of figure this out.
Yeah, it's great, man. That's awesome.
And I'll show the way it's actually set up. So this is basically like a sump tank, like you would get like I got it at Lowe's. And basically this is where the water from the alligator snapper thing, this overflows into it, and eventually this is where the actual pump for the whole system is that pumps it up into the bog filter. And this kind of does two things for me. So for one, I built this little thing where it's literally just like a pond basket with filter foam in it on a PVC like structure that I made. And that's basically for mechanical filtration. So any solids that come through get caught there and keep the actual pump from getting clogged. And main reason I did that is I didn't want the pump in with the turtles, because I didn't want the turtles chewing on the wires and stuff. So this is kind of the solution I came up with. It does have so I can drain it out from here. And this is actually, this was actually when I actually was starting it up, was one of the toughest things, figuring out the water level. So originally this was going to be an overflow in case it rained or something. So the stock tanks themselves wouldn't overflow. But I had to kind of modify it because I was trying to keep the level at where it would drain down, and that wherever it would drain down to would be the minimum level that the pump would still work without running dry. And I ended up having to go a little bit higher, so that's where this ended up coming from. I do keep, so this is actually, I kept it as a T rather than an elbow, just so I can actually look in there and kind of keep an eye on the water level as well.
Do you run into any issues with water level in there?
Since setting it up, honestly, this week I went to check it, and I was kind of nervous because I hadn't topped it off since I think Saturday. And we did get a little bit of rain on Mondays, and the water level actually today was sitting right around here.
Okay.
So basically all the way topped off. So apparently there's not too much evaporation going on right now. We'll see what happens when we get into summer, but
yeah,
that's been my problem with the stock tank setup. Is my current drainage where my pump is sitting is another 50-gallon stock tank, so it's just wide open, which has a whole host of other problems as far as leaves and everything else. Water level, because the 50-gallon stock tanks are not very deep.
No.
And so it's pretty much got to be 75% full in order for the pump to run properly. And so it's I got to top that thing off all the time. But that's good to hear that you haven't had any issues with that.
Yeah, nothing yet. And then I'll mention it here because you can kind of see it here. Each one of these, so each stock tank, obviously this little sump tank and also the bog filter all have their own drainage, so you can backflow them and drain each one individually. Originally I was trying to hook them up so they're all just one pipe and I could choose which one, but that kind of got a little complicated, so each one has its own thing now.
Yep.
From there it goes to the bog filter. So this is a 55-gallon feed drum. So I'm pretty sure my boss has horses, so I'm pretty sure that's what this came from.
Nice.
It was sitting in our attic, and I was like, well, no one's using this. So basically the way it works is the pump goes all the way up there. It goes all the way to the bottom, and the water slowly rises up to the top where it overflows into the first stock tank. It's filled with gravel. and there's like 3 different sizes of gravel in here. So it go from like pretty size, like basically rocks, to like a river rock, and then to pea gravel. So the whole idea of the bog filter is as it goes up, the solids get collected as it gets finer and finer. And eventually when I need to clean it out, this is the backwash. I take that and all the solids that have been collected, backwash out of it. And then there's also plants growing in the top here. So yeah, I have pictures of them. So the plants I have growing right now is blue flag iris, a copper iris, and then these little ones that's starting to come out are duck potato.
Oh, wow.
It's a type of Sagittaria. So like dwarf sag and stuff, it's related to that.
Interesting.
This is kind of funny because we have a little like former koi pond that's on the property, and it's basically a mud wallow currently. I don't mess with it; it's just kind of there. But I think it was like 2 springs ago, we had a wild snapping turtle show up and get stuck in it, and I know stuff, and it was like fall or something. Literally that spring, all the duck potatoes started popping up, and I'm pretty sure that he brought it with him. Like
interesting,
he ate some seeds or something and passed it through. So that whole pond has been like taken over by these duck potatoes. And
that's crazy.
They call them duck potatoes because they have like an edible tuber, but basically I just would reach in there and pull out the tubers, and like I kind of started cultivating it. And one of the pots I had cultivated, I pulled the tubers out and stuck them in there. So we'll see how they come out.
Yeah. So are they more of like a riparian plant? Like they would be?
Yeah, they look honestly, they kind of look like elephant ears. They call them like I think they also call them like an arrowhead. I have found my turtles love to eat them. So all last summer, like the cooter and the slider and everything, I would go out and like chop off a bunch of leaves and throw them in the pond.
Nice.
So it's kind of like free food.
Yeah.
So we'll see how they do in there. This all started from like literally 1 tuber that I put in a pot, and it like made like I think like 10 different plants.
That's wild.
So the snapping turtle eats them too. The gator snapper, I really haven't had a whole luck with him with vegetation yet.
So in that picture that you were just showing,
yes,
you've got like a black drain thing back there.
Yeah, so that's like a lot of the stuff I got was like at Tractor Supply. So this is like a drain you can get. So you'll see in a bit. I have them in the stock tanks too, and it's kind of just like a strainer to keep like the solids out. And then I do have this too. So what is it called? It's basically like a little bit of a nozzle, and I leave it slightly open so water does come a little bit out. Obviously, most of the water though goes down all the way to the bottom. And the point for this is if I ever lost power for some reason, it stops in air and cuts the suction so it doesn't backwash into the sump.
Yeah, I've got an issue with that too, so that's a good thing to.
That was a trick. So there's a YouTube channel called Ozponds, and so there's like there's the aquascape style of like fish or pond keeping. He does that, but he does a lot of DIY stuff with it.
Gotcha.
A lot of the stuff that I used in here, I kind of learned from him. It's honestly, if you're interested in like doing pond stuff, that's definitely a channel to look into. Because like, aquascape is like, they're really cool, but you also go bankrupt.
Yeah, for sure.
So. Yeah, I was gonna say there's a lot of stuff that like ideas and stuff I steal from him.
Okay.
Actually, I'll show you like another big thing I stole from him in a second. So this is the common snapping turtle setup. So basically overflows into here. And the thing I have going there, so
yeah, I love the way you've done this. What you're about to talk about.
Yeah. Okay. So this is basically the basking area / like land area. So with the common snapping turtle, obviously I said like she's a bulldozer. I definitely couldn't do any like fully aquatic plants. She's even bad for like she's probably going to eventually rip up all this water lettuce. But this is basically a planter itself, and I have a marginal plant growing in there, so that's a blue-eyed grass. And basically the way I have it set up is she cannot really mess with anything. So the plant's above the water line. It's not really, I don't think it's an attractive plant as far as eating for them. So far she's left it alone. The actual platform itself, though, there we go. So this is what it actually is. So it's basically a basket, and I made a PVC structure for it. I did actually end up like extending it a little bit taller, because you'll notice it's like way below the drainage in this picture. But I ended up making this with the idea that I was going to put the plants in there, and the idea that I stole from the channel I was just talking about is this thing called anoxic filters, which is basically like a passive form of filtration that all the planting baskets I ended up doing with this. And it's basically you use 100% non-clumping clay kitty litter, so like unscented and everything. You use that as the main like substrate in there, and in the center, I have actually down here with the snapping turtle, or the common alligator snapping turtle planters I did. This here is like a powder that you can buy, like some of the planted aquarium like suppliers sell it. It's called laterite.
Okay.
It's like an iron-rich clay. So you basically put a layer of the kitty litter down, you put in the laterite, and then you start putting another layer of kitty litter, and you put in the plants and stuff, and then top it off with something so they don't, whatever animals are in there don't mess around with the clay, kick it up. But basically the clay is like really high in nutrients, so the plants like it. So it makes a really good thing for the plants to grow in, and obviously the plants are doing some filtration themselves. But I guess what ends up happening is it becomes a really low oxygen environment. So you get anaerobic bacteria in there, and they actually complete the nitrogen cycle. So obviously in your aquariums you get ammonia and the nitrite and the nitrate. The anaerobic bacteria apparently take nitrate and they turn it into nitrogen, and it completely leaves the water. So it actually completes the nitrogen cycle. But the other thing is apparently the clay is, I believe the clay itself is negatively charged, and apparently ammonia is positively charged. So it actually pulls the ammonia out of the water itself into itself, and then obviously you have a plant growing in there, so the plant just takes that ammonia and uses it as nutrients.
It's like a conveyor belt for the
apparently it's like a form of like passive filtration. So I was looking for stuff to like use as planting media anyway, so I was like, all right, I'll give this a try. So
I'm definitely gonna have to use that in my new
and then setup. This is just like a gardening fabric, just so like this stuff isn't falling out of the netting and everything. But top it off with gravel, and because this was for the alligator snapper and this was underwater, I ended up using a netting on top of it. So this is like a plastic garden netting, and then I put the larger rock layer you saw on top, and that's just if he does decide to kind of dig down into the rocks, he can't actually get too far down, because I don't want to come out there and see kitty litter all over the tank. But that's basically I did. So this is inside. These are like aquatic planters. I did the same thing with the common snapping turtles setup. So that's what that is. And then I also did this one in the alligator snappers, which is just like a floating planting area. So I do have some pennywort that I pulled from inside out there, and the main plant growing in there is a swamp milkweed, which is it's a type of milkweed. So anyone familiar with native plants, that's like the host.
Oh no.
He like just ghosted and disappeared.
He's out. He's gone.
What happened?
No. We lost you, Nick. Oh, he's back.
I got booted.
All right. It's all good. It's happened before.
Yeah. All right, let's see.
Technology, man.
Yeah, can't be a podcast without a technical phone.
No. All right, let's see. Where was I? I had a picture from when I put that together. There we go. So that's the actual planter. It's kind of the same idea, but it's a hanging planter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And where he's like alligator snapper, I don't really expect him to really come out and mess with that. He could, in theory, haul himself out on there, but I'd be surprised if he did. But yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm definitely going to steal that too. All of these are just good ideas for me when I'm doing this because I'm working on the 300-gallon now.
Yeah. Yeah. So from the common snapping turtle tank into the gator snapper, it flows from there. So the common snapping turtle tank is slightly elevated, so it flows in there. Believe it or not, the whole idea of like one flowing into the other, I stole from you, Jack.
Really?
Yeah, because I remember seeing the picture of like your stock tanks flowing into the other. So I was trying to try to come up with some variation of that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
This is what I came up with for a basking area to see if he'll use it. Because one of the things I did notice with alligator snappers is it does seem a lot of time when they're basking in the wild, they're not like just hauled out on something flat. They're like actually climbing up. So I'm trying to see if I make it a little bit higher, like an actual branch, maybe he'll be enticed to bask. We'll see.
It's funny how those, like the musk turtles are the same way. Like when they are basking, they're 20 feet up in the air. Not actually, but they're super high up on the very thin branch. And you're like, how did you?
What was that? I think when I was living in Massachusetts, because that's where I grew up, there's a fishing spot I would go to. And every time I walked by this one spot, there was a down tree. And the entire tree was filled with musk turtles. And some of them were like literally 10 feet in the air.
Yeah.
So it's like
crazy.
Yeah.
They do the high dive off of there too. It's wild.
Yeah, but this is like, so there's that. I have the those are the planting baskets in there.
Yeah.
That's the other one. And those are planted with pickerel weed, white water lily, and pond shield, which is like kind of like a smaller one. And one of the points of having these in here is hopefully he doesn't destroy them. But way back when he was little, he actually almost drowned on me at one point, and I actually had to do turtle CPR on him, and I managed to get him back. So ever since then, I'm always paranoid about him having access to the surface.
Gotcha.
I have seen him like hanging out up here, so this just kind of gives him a shallow water area to hang out near the surface. Once I got him in there, I kind of realized he is big enough where if he really wants to, he can stand on his hind legs and stretch all the way to the surface. But this just kind of like, makes me feel better at night.
Yeah, I remember when you shared that, and that was scary. It actually changed the way I looked at it too. And my alligator snapping turtle's water level is actually lower because of that. Just because it's wild. You never think about an aquatic turtle drowning, but it can definitely happen.
It was nuts when it happened too, because like I was fully convinced he was like actually dead. I was on the phone with my girlfriend Amanda, because she's our turtle rehabber. So I was like, what do I do? And I'm like panicking, and I knew about turtle CPR, and I'm just like playing with his legs, like, and it was out of desperation. And after like maybe like 10 minutes, suddenly he swung his head back, and I was like, oh my God, he's alive.
Oh my God. That is crazy.
Yeah.
He was relief after that, I'm sure
it was, except like he woke up and he was kind of with it. And then for the next several days, he was like basically completely like limp. And the only way you knew he was alive is if you touched his eyes, he would blink. And it took him, it must have just taken a ton of energy out of him. It took him like 3 days until he was back to normal.
Jeez. That's so scary.
Yeah. Because like even after that, I was afraid, like, because one of the things you don't know is like how long he was down and how long he basically was going without oxygen to the brain.
Yeah.
There's a chance he could have like survived, but he was a vegetable.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So I was kind of happy he's back completely to normal.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, this setup, man, is so good.
Thanks. Oh yeah. And then the common snapping turtle's back to normal. The gator snapper's still a little shy, but she fully breaches out of the water.
Yeah, I saw you post on your story, and I was like, "Oh, that's so cool, man!"
Yeah, swamp monster coming out.
Yeah,
I was telling people that's why I have the "Don't stick your fingers in their" signs.
Yeah, yeah, which I'm gonna get from you eventually once I get this thing done because I want those signs. Those are awesome.
Yeah, there you go. The funny thing is, it's like I caught somebody posted online once, and they were also they go out doing programs and stuff, and they had a setup with an alligator snapping turtle in it. And I looked and I saw a sign, and I realized it was this exact sign. It's funny because I made that sign from scratch.
That's wild.
I know at some point they I guess stole the design, which obviously I don't care about, but
that's so cool, man.
Yeah.
What size pump are you running on that setup?
So at first I had a pump that's about 1,000 gallons per hour, and I was like, yeah, I'll just go big, and that was way too much.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So I ended up downsizing to a 600 gallon per hour pump.
Okay.
And I actually, so I have a nozzle on the, if you look up, where is it? There we go. I have basically a nozzle to kind of adjust it. So I have down the flow again. So it's maybe running 400 gallons per hour, 300 gallons per hour.
Okay.
And that seems to be a happy medium where it's not completely draining the sump, but there's also still a good amount of water flow going.
Gotcha.
And I guess the thing with the bog filters too is it's not necessarily bad if you have a slower flow going on, because the water spends more time in the gravel. Mm-hmm. So it's doing more filtering. At least that's what I understand.
Yeah. That's what I've heard too from just watching some of the aquascape videos is they'll do the big bog filter, and then they'll also run jets or have a waterfall going separately because it doesn't need to all go through the bog filter. Because it is doing such an efficient job that it's you don't need the, with aquariums, when you're looking at a biological filtration or mechanical, it's you want to have as much water going through there as possible. So you're constantly filtering it. But because it's doing such an efficient job with the bog filter, it's you can go less water going through it.
Yeah. The actual number I did hear before, which I kind of disregarded it, but now I'm okay, this kind of seems right, is you want the entire thing to turn over at least once per hour. So between the sump, the bog filter, and the two stock tanks, it comes out to roughly a little under 400 gallons. So it kind of makes sense because now that's where I ended up getting it to around 300, 400 gallons per hour.
Gotcha. Okay. Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, I think the next version I'm doing, I'm gonna keep all the things I have still, but just make them route into the 300 gallon and then into a sump at the end. But I think I'm gonna do a standard waterfall filter in for half the flow, and then the other half is gonna go through the bog filter and do that whole process. But no, man, I love this setup. You've been posting so much good stuff on your story too recently, building it, and I was we got to talk through this whole thing. So that's awesome. I think it's cool too to be able to give viewers an understanding of where you can go with this. You could turn this into a whole hydroponic system if you wanted to, or anything. But keeping large turtles, especially snapping turtles, there's an element of DIY that's necessary.
Yeah, honestly, I was gonna say the stuff they sell at the pet store isn't gonna even cover you for the red-eared sliders they're selling there.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you could get away with maybe a 125 for a male, but even then it's might as well just go outside with them because it's much easier, and it's the same as the bioactive setups. I'm sure that this setup long term is going to be much less work for you than an aquarium setup for a turtle, a basic aquarium setup. So
Yeah, I was gonna, because the other thing is I'm really big on like, even if the plants aren't directly like in the water with the turtle, like just having plants involved, I think helps a ton with like the filtration. Just because it's removing nitrogen, it's doing less, basically helping you with water changes. And I feel like the bigger the setup is indoors, the harder it gets to do that.
Yeah.
You know, you could throw a giant Monstera on your like 200 gallon, but like that's a lot of space taking up. And also a lot of these big turtles love to eat plants too. So
that's the problem. That's a huge problem. Yeah. My Podocnemis are super vegetable eaters. They will eat anything green that, like, even plastic plants I got to be careful with. Like, if it's green, they're going for it. And so I've been tooling around with how I'm going to get some live plants in there just for like a filtration benefit. But
so the funny thing is, like, the alligator snapping turtle, I have not had him. So he will eat fruit. He will eat nuts. I can't get him to eat any greens except plastic greens. He will eat those.
It's funny how that works.
They're made of plastic. He loves them.
It's a texture thing.
Yeah.
Right.
That's wild. Yeah. I have a love-hate relationship with plastic plants because, like, in some cases, like, I need them, especially for young turtles.
Yeah.
When in situations where they're going to eat all the live plants, and you need something consistently there for them to, like, kind of hang out on and have that safety blanket. But I try to avoid using plastic plants just because I know they're going to eat them eventually.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like it's always hit and miss with the turtles too. So, like, where is it? I have a picture here somewhere. So this is like my current living room setup at home for our turtles. And
Awesome.
I was going to say, I do have plastic plants in there. And so far, I've been lucky. No one tries to eat them. I'll say I do have the 2 red-eared sliders that anyone watching who's in the South Pennsylvania area, they are up for adoption. I don't want them. They came in as hatchlings. That red-eared sliders are invasive in our area, and we had someone bring in hatchlings, and obviously we can't release them, so I've kind of just had them ever since. But they're kind of in there. They've grazed algae off the plants. They have not eaten the plants themselves, and then everyone else ignores it. So this setup, admittedly, it's a bit overcrowded right now. It's a 90 gallon, but there's the 2 sliders in there, the 2 terrapins, a European pond turtle, and a razorback musk.
That's awesome.
Yeah, the only one full grown in there is the male terrapin. Everyone else is still like immature, so it's not like I have a bunch of adult turtles shoved in this tank.
Yeah, but having, like, this is where we were talking about the mixed species, like, at the beginning. That's I feel like some of the coolest things about turtles, especially you got to do it with care and make sure that they're, in similar habitats and do the same thing, and they're not going to be aggressive and stuff with each other, which is a huge thing with turtles. But being able to house different species together and, like, have kind of this, like, collection of turtles in an enclosure has always been, like, a fascination for me since I was, like, a kid.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and the other thing that does it, like, I really enjoy. So Amanda, she is really big on box turtles. Like, box turtles are her passion. That's like what got her into, like, rehab and everything. So she loves land turtles. I prefer aquatic turtles. And one of the reasons is compared to, like, other reptiles, they're, like, way more active and way more interactive. So even, like, our here in, like, at our corn snake and our king snake, they're always out all the time, but they're kind of just sitting there. You have a turtle aquarium, they're swimming around, they're looking at you, there's always movement going on. And I think that's kind of what, like, attracts me partly to turtles, like, as far as keeping them, is it's a much more, like, interactive experience compared to some of the other reptiles out there.
Yeah, they're always moving, they recognize you, they know that you feed them, and it's turtles are the best, man. I've been preaching this for a long time, but they're my favorite thing ever. They make me feel like a little kid every time I get to work with them, and it's the best. It's the best.
The one thing I will say with cohabitating turtles, and that's because I've had to talk to multiple people about this, do not put anything in with snapping turtles.
Yeah.
I see way too many people, like, with alligator snappers that they, like, put other turtles in with them, and they're like, oh, they're fine. I'm like, until the alligator snapper gets big enough that, the turtles are on the menu,
Yes.
I remember I was actually messaging Greg Bashir because we got some cooters in, like non-native cooters, and I was trying to like get an ID because I couldn't tell if they were like Florida cooters or river cooters, because the only cooter I really deal with are the northern red bellies.
Yeah.
And the picture he sent me to show me an ID, that the turtle had a giant chunk taken out of the tail, out of the shell, like a triangle. And he goes, "Oh yeah, by the way, I'm pretty sure this one was attacked by an alligator snapper." Because I was like, "Thank you for mentioning that," because there's a giant chunk of the turtle missing.
Yeah. People don't realize too that like turtles are a huge piece of their diet in the wild.
Yeah.
Especially the musk turtles and stuff that are in the area, because they're bite sized to them. It's like the perfect.
Yeah, I was gonna say they already eat like clams and everything, so it's it's not that much different.
Yeah, and you see too, like in Greg's videos, like where he's going out and walking, creeks and stuff. It's like the abundance of these musk turtles. Like, why wouldn't you eat them? They're a constantly available food source.
Yeah.
So,
well, I remember definitely. He what was it? I think one of his alligator snappers, not like his adults, but he has one. I think it's like named as Lloyd.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure he's talked about like that one climbed out of its stock tank once and jumped into a baby turtle stock tank. And it like, it went as you can imagine.
Yeah. Oh, jeez. Jeez. Yeah. That'll happen too. You know what's funny though is when my alligator snapping turtle he was probably 5 or 6 inches. Mm-hmm. I had him in with a slider at the time, and the slider was the bully.
Oh yeah, I don't.
He would mess with him all the time, and I was like, "You just wait, man." And then I separated them because he's a dick, for lack of a better term, the slider specifically. But I was like, if I kept you in there long term, like that's gonna be bad.
Honestly, that's like one of my biggest peeves with sliders too. Like on top of just like everyone buying them and then not being a really good like aquarium turtle, is they're just not nice. The other turtles,
no.
So the ones they're both male. They both beat the snot out of each other.
Yeah,
it's like everyone else in that tank gets along, and then there's these 2 sliders that are constantly like nipping at each other. I'm like, well, you 2 cut it out.
Yeah, yeah. I had a big female that I ended up rehoming that was given to me. It was a rescue situation when I was in college, and it was given to me, and I had it for probably 3 years, and then had to move, so I had to rehome it. But I had her and then the male that I still have together, and she took a liking to his exposed junk, and she bit it in half, and so I had to go have surgery done on this turtle where they actually removed his whole package, which was a wild occurrence. I was like, I can't believe, like I had to miss class. I was still in school at the time, and I had to miss class, and I had to send a professor an email like, yeah, sorry, I got to take my turtle to the vet. Left out the part that he's getting his penis removed, but yeah. Just wild. But they'll bite anything. If it looks like something that they could eat, they'll
bite anything.
Yes. Yeah. Sliders are just so like I have these 2. I do also have like a yellow belly red ear like cross that also came in. So it was like a cross that like actually happened from someone releasing a yellow belly and a red eared slider in the same area. But she's been great so far. She could always turn, but like if the slider's like well behaved, I'm like they're on my good list. Like I'm like, you can stay as long as you want. I was like, those 2 they're too much. They not only pester each other, but they try to like they're always like doing the nail thing to like the other girls, and the female terrapin's like ready to like throw down with them.
Unwanted advances.
Yeah.
That's awesome. We're coming up on 2.5 hours here, so we probably got to cut it here shortly. Yeah. And we didn't talk about the Diamondback terrapin setup, which we'll have to do a follow-up episode here too.
Or the box turtles, man.
Or the box turtles. I know we let Brenden down. We let Brenden down on that one.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. We're gonna have you back on because
there's a lot more to talk about. Yeah, and
this is one of the ones where like I'm gonna have to like listen back and like just absorb all the information that's been in this episode, man. It's insane.
Yeah.
Sorry for the info dump.
No,
I love it. This is exactly what we want to do.
Yeah. It was so good. And there's a ton of like other enclosures and stuff that you've got that we didn't even touch on. So
yeah.
We'll definitely have to come back to this. But I had one final question that I wanted to ask before we left. And we kind of, we talked about your history and stuff, but like, I want to know why turtles are the thing for you. A lot of other people get into snakes and lizards and stuff like that, but we haven't had a turtle guest on here yet. So I kind of want to talk about like why turtles were it for you.
So like my honestly, my interest in reptiles like originally started with snakes and lizards and crocodilians, like, growing up with the crocodile hunter and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And turtles were kind of like always on the back burner. When I was younger, I did like have a couple turtles here and there, like, and that kind of sparked my interest, but it wasn't until like finally, like, I moved out on my own and I went back to school and everything. I started working here and I started working with the turtles like more. And also I ended up meeting Amanda, obviously, who she's a turtle rehabber. So always dealing with the turtles. So they kind of like, they just kind of ended up taking like center focus. And part of it is like what I mentioned earlier is it's just like, they're like a much more interactive, like, animal to work with.
Yeah.
Like even when you find them like out in the field, if you go herping or something, it's like they're a much more slow paced animal. Like you kind of can sit there and like enjoy them. A lot of times you run into a snake, so it's like they dart and they're gone.
Yeah.
And then this far north, we have lizards, but we don't see them. So
so you don't have lizards.
Yeah, so we're supposedly here. But yeah, no, it's on. They're just like really, for me, they're enjoyable to work with just because like you can kind of sit there and like watch them. They're doing stuff all the time. Even like box turtles and stuff, like when we have them here and like you put them in like the outdoor enclosures that we have, they meander around, they dig, they look for stuff. Yeah, no, they're just like, I love snakes and lizards, but it's just for me, like turtles just seem like they're just like, they catch my interest a lot more.
Yeah.
I still am like a big snake person. There's snakes I have on my list that I would like to get and work with, but yeah, no, I think for me, the turtles like take priority. It's like when I go home, like after I'm working here, this is in our living room and we actually have like a big L-shaped couch that's on the opposite side of the room. So like you can sit there and watch TV, but half the time too, I'll just sit there and watch the turtles like swim back and forth and interact with each other and everything.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm the same. I've got a 55 in my bedroom that's also my office, so I'll get very distracted while I'm trying to work, just sitting there watching the turtles and the fish and everything.
Yeah, I mean that would happen when I had the turtles in my office. Now I have a pine snake, but he hides half the time. So, especially when I had the alligator snapping turtle in here, I'd be working and then suddenly he like pops up in the glass and I just stop what I'm doing and I'm like watching him sitting there wiggle his tongue at me and then he starts like poking and prodding in the leaves looking for stuff. So it's just very easy to get like distracted watching them.
Yeah, because they're always doing something, like you said. They're thinking about something or they're moving or whatever, but they don't sit still unless they're basking and then they're perfectly still. But
yeah, and even when you see them out in the wild, usually when you see a snake, it's kind of like just sitting around. Obviously, you'll see turtles out basking and stuff too, but if you get to like a spot that they're actually in the water, they're like actively doing stuff. So you can I've sat there and like watched like soft shells like poke and prod around here, and same with like snapping turtles and painteds and stuff. So it's even in the wild, it's like you can sit and just watch a turtle do its thing.
Yeah. Absolutely. I love that, man. I love that. I want to grow the turtle hobby. Just it's a personal goal of mine because I just feel like I think first of all, it's not done correctly for most of the time.
We talk about it all the time with like, the sizes of turtles that are commonly available.
Yeah. Yeah. None of the cooter species and none of the slider species should be pets. Or not necessarily they shouldn't be pets, but like, first turtle, average keeper probably shouldn't have those.
Yeah, you should be able to just go and buy a red-eared slider for $10 at Petco.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's the thing is it's like it's not done correctly, but I think it's much easier than people think it is. You just have to know the basics, and then I think it's like the most rewarding pet that you can have.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm just a huge fan of the turtle hobby and just the professionalism that goes along with it as well. With the TTBG and the TSA,
yeah,
much more involved they are with the private sector than they, some of these organizations tend to be with snakes.
I was gonna say that's like one thing like I've always talked about with people too, is it's like you'll hear people talking about like insurance colonies, like with like turtles and stuff, and it's like sometimes people with like lizards and snakes will talk about that, but there's not really any connection between the private sector and like zoos or conservation organizations for them. But with like the turtle hobby, it's like they're connected.
Yeah. You have organizations directly with links between both.
Yeah, there's people in the private sector that have animals that are in the active stud book for that species.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting because I don't think you really see that with like any other group of animals that people keep.
No, definitely not. Definitely not with the large mammals either. The lions and stuff.
Yeah, they think, no, that's Tiger King.
Yeah. But it is really interesting, and I think it has a lot to do with like the professionalism that the turtle hobby tends to have for like the serious hobbyists, and just having those connector organizations like the TTBG and the TSA and the Turtle Conservatory and things like that, that they kind of bridge the gap between the two, which is really awesome. But I think also just turtles being as endangered as they are, it's kind of like captive breeding is necessary, because you're not importing these, which is good,
I mean, honestly, with in regard to like rehab, that's like one thing I always talk to people about, because it's like, I said we have like 200 squirrels. If not, obviously we don't want this, but if all 200 squirrels didn't make it, it's not going to hurt the squirrels. But if I have 200 box turtles over there and they all don't make it, that's actually like a huge impact on the population.
Yeah.
It helped like even one of them that was like hit by a car. That's like just because of the way box turtles, like their life history is like their reproductive cycle and their lifespans. Like if you save just one, it's like even that's just helping the population.
Yeah.
So I always tell people like not to prioritize one animal over another, but I think the work that we do with turtles here at the rehab is like the most important compared to some of the other ones, just from a conservation standpoint.
Yeah, it's like the impact is actually felt by the work that you guys do. The scale is much smaller, which is awesome. Or well, depending on how you look at it, smaller or bigger. But it's like the impact of a singular animal is huge, and that's awesome. And just really appreciate the work that you guys are doing, because I know it's probably filled with a lot of hard days as well as the good ones. So yeah, I'm sure that's pretty difficult a lot of the time. So definitely big props to you and your girlfriend Amanda for doing that kind of work, because it's very important. So awesome. Well, I think with that, Nick, I think we should go ahead and wrap up. And like we said, we'll definitely have to have you back for another episode.
Yeah,
here.
For sure.
Oh, absolutely. I would love to come back.
Awesome. Is there any links or anything that you want to drop for people to check out your stuff? Or
so if you want to, so obviously if you want to check me out, you can follow me on Instagram. It's Loki_and_Brewster. As far as like ARC, if you want to like learn about what we do, if you're in the area and you're interested in programs, or you want to know like what to do with injured wildlife if you find it, or where to bring it, our website is aark.org. And then we also are on Facebook and Instagram under ARC Wildlife.
Awesome. We'll have all those links down in the show notes as well, so people can go check that out. Just really, again, thank you for coming on, Nick. We really enjoyed it, and would really encourage everyone to go check out your Instagram and check out ARC. Your Instagram is filled with some gold mines of awesome ideas and just cool enclosures that you've done. So would highly recommend everyone go check those out.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, for me, you can find me at Jack_Oliver_reptiles on Instagram. We'll change that at some point.
You keep saying that, but it is yet to happen.
I got to figure out what I want to do. I don't know. It's a long process. But yeah, so you can check me out there. Make sure you guys follow the podcast page as well, Beyond the Terrarium, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Brenden, you want to drop your links?
Yeah, it's just BM Exotics on Instagram, and then my personal Facebook, Brenden Meyer. But if you want to get a hold of me, Instagram is definitely the spot. So
that's how I text Brenden.
Yeah. I can't get away from this man.
All right, everybody. Well, we appreciate you tuning in. This was a longer one, but it was an amazing episode.
It was so good.
We stuck through it because it was great information. So, but with that, we'll see you guys next week for a boys only episode.
Yeah, we're gonna do another edition of the naturalistic stuff, right?
Yeah.
The next one,
part 2.
Nice.
So, awesome. All right, guys. Well, enjoy your night. Thank you.